I call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, August 9, 2021, and the time is 7 p.m. Dr. Hillman, there were some items in the table file.
Yes, we had several items in the table file this evening, including some additional appointments, some additional increase, decrease, and changes in assignment. We had some resignations. We also had a contract for translation services with Mar Valdecantos. And we had a grant application approval, and we had a modest update to the resolution adoption of health and safety measures for the 21-22 school year. So those are the items that are in your table file.
Okay, excellent. If there's no objections, we'll add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Amy. Is there a second? Second by Jeff. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We now have an opportunity for public comment. This is an opportunity for residents, business, property owners, parents, students, and employees of the Northfield School District to address the board. We ask that you adhere to the guidelines set in place by District Policy 206 regarding public comment. This is a listening opportunity for the board and not a time to debate an issue. You are prohibited from making comments about specific students, staff, or administrators. The board respects and values input from the public, but when it relates to a specific student, staff, or administrator, such input must be heard by the appropriate personnel, such as the building principal or superintendent, and not during an open meeting of the school board. We require that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes. You are not allowed to yield your time to another person, and it is expected that you will address your remarks with civility and respect. You will address the board from the podium. After being recognized by the chair, please identify yourself and the group you represent, if any. Please state your reason for addressing the board. The board has allotted up to 30 minutes at each regular school board meeting for public comment. I will call those who have signed up to speak in the order in which they arrived this evening. Amy Gorwitz, Vice Chair, will signal each speaker when they have 30 seconds remaining. Okay, so welcome to those who wish to make public comment this evening. That first person is Kyle Hoffert. Welcome, Kyle.
Dr. Hillman, members of the school board, thank you for having me. I'm here as a family physician today and as a parent of multiple Northfield public school children to read to you a letter that was written by a group of Northfield physicians, physician assistants, and epidemiologists supporting our following of the current guidance regarding to the COVID epidemic. So we, as a group, wanted you to strongly consider the benefits and risks of masking in schools. We recommended the district adopt a universal masking policy for all children and staff on campuses, as recommended by the CDC, Minnesota Department of Health, and the American Academy of Pediatrics. Specifically, we suggest having this policy in place for the first 6 weeks of the school year. After 6 weeks, the district can reassess the risk of the Delta variant-driven classroom transmission based on the experiences of other districts in Minnesota and nationally. We base this recommendation on the following. Number one, in addition to strong recommendations from the CDC, Minnesota Department of Health, and American Academy of Pediatrics, at least 6 states are starting the school year with universal masking. These states recognize that masking in schools will decrease the rate of transmission and help keep community case rates lower. Similar to basic hygiene and public health measures such as hand washing, providing clean drinking water and fresh food, and staying home when sick, this is a common sense public health measure for which the rationale is not controversial. Number two, with the goal to keep students in the classroom, the CDC has created a quarantine exception for K through 12 students. When both infected and exposed students are engaged in consistent and correct use of well-fitting masks, exposed students won't need to quarantine. Universal masking significantly decreases the likelihood of students needing to quarantine if exposed at school, keeping more kids in school more of the time. Number three, we know that COVID readily spreads in indoor spaces where large numbers of people gather for extended periods. We also know the Delta variant is far more infectious than previous strains of the virus. School classrooms can be ideal environments for transmission. Number four, we recognize the district's goal to serve all students who are a diverse group with different needs and health conditions. Among these, some students with special health needs and disabilities may be immune compromised, and even if vaccinated against COVID-19, or if unable to be vaccinated, they may have waning or poor immunity and be at higher risk from COVID-19. Their ability to receive an equitable education in a public school may be compromised if COVID-19 spreads readily in the school setting. We also recognize that there is a small but vocal minority who will state that masking violates their freedoms and poses health risks to their children. There is no science that supports claims of adverse outcomes for mask wearing by healthy children. We acknowledge that there is political pressure to appease this vocal minority. John Barry, author of The Great Influenza, reflecting on failures of policy 100 years ago during the last global pandemic, wrote, "When you mix politics and science, you get politics." We invite the district as an educational institution to continue to look towards science as it has done in the beginning of the pandemic, since the beginning of the pandemic. Thank you for your time. That's all I have.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sandra Turbas. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Hillman and members of the board. Following on Dr. Hofford's comments, I was one of the co-signers of that letter, and I just want to say we deeply appreciate all the work that all of you are doing and the ongoing difficulty that COVID continues to present for schools and the community. And we shared this letter in a spirit of collaboration and the fervent wish to see as many students as possible have an in-school, in-person, minimally disrupted school experience this fall, including those more vulnerable students. We did recommend that 6-week period initially, but I appreciate the idea to continue to assess this in a more ongoing way as numbers change. Things may change more quickly. Ideally, the Delta surge will end more quickly than 6 weeks. And we would all love to see that improve, and with immunization rates improving, then to not have to enforce or require masks in schools, as well as for the younger ages when the vaccine is available. We recognize that will be longer than 6 weeks. Just the idea that we wanted to see this year start on the right foot that way. I did want to make an additional comment about the question of quarantine and contact tracing. It's a great CDC exception that when if there's a person with COVID found out later and an exposed person, if both are wearing well-fitting masks the entire time of the exposure, that a quarantine is not required, which is great. However, with lunch periods and things like that, it may be possible that there will be unmasked time. And so I hope that there's a understanding that there may be a wish or a need to do some contact tracing at some point, but hopefully far less than if masks were not part of the picture. And I just want to acknowledge how much kids have lost, both in school and around the world. A lot of their school experiences, a lot of fun with friends, a lot of loss during this time. And I also know that, over 1.5 million kids in the world have actually lost a primary caregiver to COVID. So that's another kind of loss. And I don't think our kids would want to lose, to go to school, bring home COVID, maybe lose a loved one to COVID they brought home, and to sort of have that weigh on them. That's another loss. That would be a terrible loss. And to lose more in-person education time. Those are things none of us wants to see. So I think this is the best way to give kids what they need during this school year. So just in summary, along with the Minneapolis and St. Paul school districts, along with several others and other entire states, as Delta surges so quickly and looks to peak right as the school year is starting, we believe that the indicators are clear that the way to achieve a safe and in-person fall is to start the school year with universal masking. Thank you.
Thank you. Harvey Jensen, welcome.
Good evening. My name's Harley Jansen, and I was supposed to be on vacation right now. I actually drove 2.5 hours to be here because I'm that passionate about this. I'm a parent of 5 children in the Northfield School District, 2 in high school, 2 in middle school, and 1 in early ventures. We moved here from Des Moines, Iowa 2 years ago because my job with DuPont Pioneer required me to live somewhere in the state of Minnesota, Wisconsin. And we spent some time researching a community for that. We wanted a community, and specifically with 5 children and a community with a good, strong school district. And Northfield was what we came up with. Unfortunately, my experience with Northfield the last 2 years is not that. It's not a good experience. It's been negatively impactful for our children, including the denial of state-ordered services for our son that was adopted out of foster care, and that services that were on his early learning plan. And I'd gladly dig into that detail later. But however, tonight I want to focus on the agenda item in the proposal of mask mandates for these children 2 and up. As your board packet documents, Mr. Hillman's going to recommend adopting this proposal, and I firmly disagree. We do not need more barriers to education. Throughout this year, I've met with Mr. Hillman, I've met with Mr. Jeleno and other school leaders. All will agree that masks, plexiglass, social distancing, time out of the classroom hinder the educational process. And our the test scores reflect that hindrance. Mr. Hillman's going to present approximately 28 signatures suggesting that this proposal is needed. I could contend many things about the negative impacts of masks, the physical impacts, the social, emotional, mental impacts, and many others may present some of those negative impacts tonight. But I'm simply going to say that if you gave me the time and the resources afforded to Mr. Hillman, I could come up with 28 signatures saying the exact opposite thing. I can find information on the CDC website contradicting this proposal. And I think that's because we can all agree that a significant portion of the reaction to this very real virus has been largely political. There are 7 states that are choosing to review the same amount of data with equally intelligent people that have passed laws preventing mask mandates in schools, Iowa being one of them. And I think we can agree that that's all political. I don't want to have a law that has to go into place because of a political reason, just like I don't want a mask mandate on my kids. I don't envy yourselves. I said that to Mr. Hillman when we met, but this is the good news. This really is the good news. So listen, this burden isn't your burden. It's mine as a parent. Let me make the medical decisions for my children, whether to mask or not to mask. Your burden is clearly stated in the mission statement of the school, which is educating our children. So please focus on the education of our children. Leave what is clearly politics out of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Todd Lydell. Welcome.
By the way. Thank you. My name is Todd Lytle. I'm a resident here for 7 years of Northfield. Thank you, board, for what you do. I had the honor of serving on a board for 8 years, but there was 12 of us, Matt, so I can't imagine what you had to do when you have to deal with 12 versus just 6. So we're thankful for that. I know it's not an easy job. Why am I here? It's similar to what the young dad said there. This mask mandate has become, unfortunately, very political. I do disagree with the doctor on the other side here, because you can find doctors on the other side that'll explain the data the other way. We have plenty of states that have gone and have the same no mask policy as the ones that were very strict, and they have the same rates that came back. We have a fear that we're putting into our children, which really bothers me. I served in my country for over 18 years, and I served so everybody could have their freedom of choice. But I didn't serve that we could have fear, because fear is not what we live by. That's not what we do for our children. And that's what bothers me the most. 99.6% of us will survive COVID. The other shocking event I'm going to tell you right now is we all will die someday. The fact that death is going to be eradicated, if you look across the spectrum of the world to what people die of, it's incredible. I'm not anti-vax. I was in the military. I have more shots and more parts of my body than I can ever imagine or ever think about. So I'm not that way. But what we're trying to do here now is scare people on 99.6% recovery off something. And we're scaring our kids to that. And then I have educators in my family too. You can't educate with that mask on. I don't care what teachers say. You have to have the verbal expression to be able to educate. Our children are being set back. So I'm not here to change your mind. I can actually see right now those that have masks and don't have masks. You already made up your mind. I'm just challenging you. Don't think that way, because we've made it a we and a they kind of situation. And that's not the way our country is. You're not actually always right, and I'm not always right. There is some middle ground. As the parent just stated, let the parents make that decision versus it dictate from here. And I would challenge you. Let's look at the states, the countries that have done this, the private schools that have not done masks, and they have survived. The rates are no different than those that have done the heavy masking, the shields, and everything else that goes around with that. I just want to, again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your service to our community. And I pray that you guys would reconsider this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Jess Paulson, welcome.
Thank you. Public speaking is my worst nightmare, so I'm just going to get right into it and read an email that I sent to Matt. I just believe that all of you need to hear words on a mother's heart right now, and My hope is that you will be vulnerable enough to receive it and that I can get through this without tears. Here we go. I couldn't read the most recent district update regarding masks and not reach out. This is my breaking point of remaining silent, which too many of us are still doing. I too am still guilty of this. I'm not going to flood you with statistics and other reputable information, though I could. I simply want to tell you as a mother of 4 children, 3 of whom I plan to have attend your schools in just a few weeks, found this update to be incredibly disheartening. We unenrolled our 2 school-age children from the district last year. No portage, no Zoom. We unenrolled them to homeschool. I realize not every family has the means to do such thing. I want to be clear in that we didn't unenroll them because we feared the virus. We made the decision solely because of the requirement of wearing a mask. It was and still is that important to us and many, many other parents and teachers we know. Many of those same teachers we know personally who complied with something they do not even agree with, but did so that they could return to work as normal this fall. We had a son entering kindergarten and a son entering 6th grade. It is worth mentioning that our 6th grader, now almost 7th grader, has a disability. He is labeled by doctors as immunocompromised, and I want to note here that parents of immunocompromised children also have differing views on this subject. The detriments to our children's social and emotional health and well-being because of the decision to require masks is far more concerning to me than any serious health complications they are at risk for, due to the extremely low risk of this. These are precious, golden, formative years, and what they will miss out on from the restrictions of mask wearing cannot be replaced. They won't get a redo. Obviously, we couldn't send our son to his first school experience in a mask, or our new middle schooler. So we didn't. Though it was a year I never imagined, I poured everything into this year with them. This was our year that was. My kids were safe at home. They were unmasked, learning and growing. I know I cannot replicate a classroom or a school full of children, though it feels like I can at sometimes with 4 children home. But I can still do wonderful things, and that we did. Things that school really couldn't, especially in times such as these. There is beauty in both. Anyway, maybe I can keep them home in our sacred bubble a little while longer if I need to, because I get to. I get that choice. Those words are not lost on me. I don't want to. I want them in our schools. I want them with their peers. I want them at school. But where I get to choose, so many people we know and love don't have that luxury. They do not want their children in masks. Very few people I know in this district do want that. And if I'm being honest, I know 2 people in my life. I hope it is clear that
I'm
these
sorry,
words
thank
come
you.
from the heart of any parent.
Thank you. Next is Holly Useldinger. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Holly Useldinger, and I can relate to the mother who just spoke. Public speaking is not my jam, and I'm just going to try to get through this and also hope not to cry because I was bawling all morning long. I wanted to start off by thanking each of you for the position you hold in keeping the best interests of the students, teachers, and other staff members in the Northfield School District. I don't envy your position to make these difficult decisions, yet appreciate each of you for helping our community navigate our new normal with COVID-19. I understand that the school board is in a seemingly lose-lose situation, yet I ask that you listen with an open heart and open mind. I'm writing with, well, I wrote this email, so now I'm speaking with neither a religious nor political affiliation or agenda. Instead, I am writing as a concerned mother. I am a mother who has taken the safety precautions, guidelines, and requirements very seriously throughout this entire pandemic. We are also a family who has different views and values throughout this global pandemic. We choose love, understanding, and respect towards each other, family, friends, and strangers in their personal decision to vaccinate. My husband is fully vaccinated, and I am choosing to remain unvaccinated. With that being said, I also feel that excluding volunteers who are not fully vaccinated seems extreme. Before deciding to exclude volunteers who are not fully vaccinated, I urge you to consider allowing volunteers to be properly masked and or with negative COVID tests to still volunteer in their child's classroom. I cannot sit back and not at least try to be as involved in my child's academics as possible when I was trying to explain to my almost 3rd grader and kindergartner why I can't be in the classroom with them, but their daddy can. they didn't understand. And they're going to watch other parents come in and be wishing that their mom was there, because I was at volunteering weekly. I was at every field trip. I was a school teacher before staying home with them, and they're not going to understand why I can't be there. It shouldn't fall on them because I'm not choosing to vaccinate. But can't we do other things besides just saying, nope, you're not vaccinated, you're not allowed in our school? As far as the masks go, honestly, I don't think I'm going to change anybody's mind. However, my third grader started bawling, thinking of going to school. This year, we did Portage last year, but thinking of going to school this year, she was so excited because she's doing summer plus and she's so excited to go back to school. And now she just started bawling, thinking of having to wear a mask because she has hard time breathing. And so she's scared. And she was able to express that to me because we have an open, loving home that they're allowed to share their feelings. And I just fear for the kids that aren't able to have those feelings and express them with their adults in their life. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Michael Schaefer. Welcome.
Good evening. Excuse me, thanks for your time. I guess I didn't really prepare anything tonight, but just wanted to speak as an advocate for my children. I am a father of a 4-year-old who actually attends down, or a 5-year-old who attends Divine Mercy down in Faribault. But we also do send our 2-year-old and our 8-month-old up to Early Ventures. And we make that decision because of the quality, even at that age, the quality education that we felt like we would receive by coming up here. It's a hindrance for our family. And now what I am concerned that we are going to be masking my 2-year-old in that very formative age where they are looking and learning, seeing what people are doing and trying to interact with those people. And that is a very informative age for my child. I realize probably not going to change anyone's mind that we're going to start the school year with a mask. That's fine. But I please just beg that we can keep reevaluating and get those, at least the real young kids, out of the mask as soon as we can. Typically, if those children get sick, they do not get real sick. Our COVID actually went through our house. The young children did not get sick, which is typical of COVID. I don't want them to pass it on to anybody else, but let's look at the realist, what the data is actually saying. We're always about the data, right? Everyone's about the data. But just can we get those young kids out of the mask as early as possible so they can get that education? Because that's what they're getting at this age. They're getting the interaction with people. They're not necessarily learning ABCs or everything. They're learning interaction. They're learning play. And that's why we want our kids up here. And we want them in that situation to learn those things. So at the 6 weeks, let's please reevaluate with an open mind. And if we can get those kids out of the mask, that'd be awesome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Victoria Lemke. Welcome.
Hello. I am one of the moms that is not good at public speaking, but I am here. My name is Victoria Lemke, and I'm here to discuss your 2021-22 COVID protocols. After sending an email to Mr. Hillman and the board last week on behalf of myself and many parents, receiving the email Friday that you are trying to make masks mandatory for our children is very disheartening. We do not believe it is your right to decide that for our families. We have been patient, and now we have had enough. As parents, we have the right to make medical and safety decisions for our children, not you. That is not on you. That is what makes us the parents. Your decision comes based on increased cases. Last week's cases for Rice County for 7 days are 83. For the entire weekend, 8 cases. From Friday to this morning, 8 total cases. I've researched the entire state, hospital cases as well, also low. We're not surging our hospitals. I work in healthcare. I work in an OR room. We are okay. Making masks required for the age group least affected by this virus is absolutely ridiculous and downright wrong. The amount of damage they have already done emotionally is something we will be dealing with for a very long time. Having young elementary children not seeing facial expressions from their peers is not healthy for them, and it makes my stomach turn. This virus is not going away. There is no end game. This is going to keep changing as a virus does. We already see this with the common cold and influenza. We have to learn to live with this, and masking the ones least affected is not the answer to that. I would like to see the data that backs your decision. Upon research I found, it doesn't. One example is schools in Florida. Not political, just schools in Florida. Last year had 40% of their schools unmasked, completely unmasked, not including their private schools and charter schools, and 60% masked. In the unmasked counties, they had lower per capita cases. You all have the decision tonight to not pass these protocols and to allow each family to do what they see is in their child's best interest. Like the surrounding districts have already done, because you do not have our permission to mask our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker for this evening is Hayes Piker. Welcome.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate everything that you guys do. Again, usually I'm not nervous speaking, but I am a little bit nervous. So I just want to, just the passion of the people on both sides of this is amazing. So I just want to ask or wonder, with Dr. Osterholm saying that basically the cloth masks don't do anything and that it really isn't effective, and that, we need to use the N95 masks. I hope that those are the ones that are provided. He said, we know today that many of the face cloth coverings that people wear are not effective in reducing the virus movement in our in or out. And that's from Dr. Osterholm. The psychological harm that this does to children, I hope you each really consider this. Again, I probably won't change anybody's mind, but I live one time and I get one spin around the globe, so I'm just going to say it as it is. I really believe that with my daughter knowing that she's scared now that she's going to have to mask up, I would just hope you understand the mental and psychological pain that this causes the kids, especially when we look at the data, and the data that we use for their age group is basically there's nothing that substantiates going to a mask mandate. It really doesn't. I just hope that you understand that that facial expressions are really it mutates their communication and can result in robotic and emotionless interaction. And think of how impressionable the children that we have going to school are. Think about that, and I hope that when you make this decision, you really think about the long-term effects that has compared to the death rate and the infection rate that the children have with this disease. I think it far outweighs masking our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment portion of tonight's meeting, and we appreciate those who step forward. The board does value and respect your opinion. So we'll move on now to announcements and recognitions. Dr. Hillman.
We have one announcement this evening. The Greenvale Park Community School report to the community was completed this month. This report details the results of the 7th year of the community school programming at Greenvale Park. And the report's in process of being shared with Greenvale Park families. All families who have preschool children living in the Greenvale Park attendance boundaries, and our community partners. We really want to thank everyone who assisted with the report's compilation. We're really proud of the Greenvale Park Community School. It's been doing some excellent things over the last 7 years, providing lots of out of school time opportunities. So board members should have a copy of this evening. And again, folks who attend Greenvale Park, or if you have a preschooler in that Greenvale Park attendance area, you'll also be receiving a copy of this report very soon, I believe. So that is our only announcement for this evening.
Okay, excellent. Is there anything board members would like to add? No? Okay, let's move on to items for discussion and report. And we welcome Erin Bailey, Director of Community Education, to present the continuous school improvement plan. Welcome, Erin.
Perfect. Thank you, board members, for having me here tonight. Thank you, Tim. You can advance to the next slide. So as a reminder, Northfield Public Schools, the Community Education Department supports the learning and participation of adults and children in our community through citizen involvement, access to school and community resources, and promotion of collaboration and partnerships. Community education's work is to bring the community together, and we offer programs that develop skills, inspire creativity, and promote living healthfully. That is the cover of our fall brochure that was started being delivered to households this past Friday. So we hope you've all received a copy and are spending time picking out what you'd like to be involved in this year. You can advance, Tim. Thank you. So as we review the goals from last year, some of the key goal areas that you can see that were established at the Northfield Community Education Center are what you see below. One, of course, goal based on who is in that building is that we want students to be prepared for entering kindergarten. As you can see on the graphs then on the right, 100% of those students who left Early Ventures Learning Center last year entered kindergarten ready for kindergarten. When you look at that graph, just to help you understand what we're looking at, students entering kindergarten at the 40th percentile above are considered ready for kindergarten. So the graph that says EV below is Early Ventures, and then NPS is Northfield Public Schools. That is the kindergarten cohort as a whole. Kids who are in the 40th to 50th percentile are just below the grade level benchmark. Again, they're considered kindergarten ready, but they are just slightly below the kindergarten benchmark. In hand-in-hand preschool, we saw 84% of those children being kindergarten ready in both reading and math. These are really exciting numbers. I will say this kindergarten cohort this past year had some of the highest assessment data we have seen in many years. But again, the programs coming out of the Northfield Community Education Center also had students achieving at a very, very high level. The data that you do, the graphs that you do see, we do collect that data through the data sharing agreement for all preschools and childcare centers throughout Northfield. So they provide us their cohort level data and we provide back their readiness level. So nothing is associated with children's names, but it helps for everyone to see kind of how they are doing with their cohort as they enter kindergarten. So Hope Langston, Director of Instructional Services, and I have a great time on a little tour visiting preschools and childcare centers throughout Northfield. It is a time where we feel to support each other in what our needs are. We learn from each other and what's working well throughout the community. And it was really exciting this last year to share some great results with people. This information then is also at the kindergarten cohort as a whole is shared with all pre-kindergarten throughout the community and kindergarten staff at a meeting in typically late November, early December. So we do invite everyone together to see what this data looks like as well. Which I will highlight in the next slide, but creating strong partnerships to serve the families at the Northfield Community Education Center and throughout the community is again, one of our key components of the work that we've done in that building. And then of course, it was supporting students and families during a difficult year. This past year, some of the examples of what we did provide childcare to families during both family conferences at the start of last school year, and that was for 53 kids, September 8th through 11th. And then while distance learning did take place last year, we offered Tier 1 childcare on what would have been regularly planned school days, November 19th through January 28th, and we served 206 different students in that time. We then, through a grant from the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation, provided supports to students throughout preschool students throughout the Northfield community during distance learning. So we were able to provide students with activity kits, driveway visits, visits to home daycares, and those were delivered both through hand-in-hand preschool and through preschools throughout the Northfield community. If you want to advance the slide, Tim, that would be great. As I said, the Northfield Community Education Center continues to serve a community within its buildings and outside of its walls. A few examples of that this past year, we did, in partnership with Rice County Public Health, offer both a flu clinic and a COVID-19 vaccination clinics were offered on site. There were 335 people who accessed those clinics. You can see pictures from the setup of those clinics above. Then in partnership with the Community Action Center, we held regular food distributions in the parking lot between the Northfield Community Education Center and the Greenville Parks Elementary School. There were 4,962 people who accessed those food distributions last year. We are currently offering a free farmers market at the Northfield Community Education Center. It's offered on the west side of the building every Tuesday and Friday afternoon. And the food shelf space that will be operated by the Community Action Center at the Northfield Community Education Center will be opening on September 21st. You can move forward, Tim. Well, as we look towards our strategies and assessments for this upcoming year, in family engagement, the vast majority of our programs for students who are enrolled, we will have 100% of students who will receive 2 positive phone calls, emails, or notes from staff prior to the end of the 4th quarter. We will also engage 100% of eligible families will connect through the Talking Points app, which, as you all know, has been piloted in buildings this year and very successful. As you saw in my report, the Northfield Community Education Center serves a very diverse population with language needs beyond English and Spanish. And so we're very excited to be accessing Talking Points next year to just enhance communication, especially with families who have limited English ability. In employee engagement, we will have 2 rounding conversations will be offered to all of our licensed and non-licensed staff working in the Northfield Community Education Center. One of those will happen prior to 2nd quarter, and the other will happen prior to the 4th quarter. And I know you're all familiar with the rounding conversations, but it's a great time to gather feedback from staff and really learn how things are going from them and what we can do to have continuous improvement. We will, in an anti-racism goal, we will continue to have a list of culturally appropriate resources will be available for program teachers to use with students during the social and emotional learning time to ensure every child feels represented. That time, again, of course, is offered. We do follow the social emotional curriculum with all of the programs that are happening in the Northfield Community Education Center. Then we will also continue to build a diverse staff at the building by increasing our staff of color and or staff fluent in language other than English by 5%. And you can advance the slide. In our learner outcomes goal, again, we are striving for a high level of achievement in kindergarten readiness. And so you can see the goals that are presented for both hand-in-hand preschool and early ventures learning center. We, of course, progress monitor with students along the way too, so we will continue to excel in having children ready for kindergarten out of the Northfield Community Education Center. And then also 100% of the eligible hand-in-hand preschool classrooms will implement the pre-kindergarten Haggerty curriculum with fidelity. This aligns with what the elementary Haggerty curriculum is doing. And so this really will, it is Hope Langston, I think, as you know, speaks highly of the work of this curriculum in helping to prepare students in the area of literacy. Our stewardship goal, the Community Education Department will manage resources to remain within the department budget. And then I didn't want to list all of the partnership goals here. They are in the in my report to the board, but we will continue to obviously have numerous partners that work with the community. That is part of what community education is about. And in the Community Education Center, the Healthy Community Initiative continues to office out of there with at least 4 staff working there, many of them being early childhood navigator staff who are making great connections with families out in the community. I mentioned that the Community Action Center will be opening their food shelf. The Minnesota Children's Museum, we will implement what has been designed. It is very exciting. We were, of course, hoping it would be installed this in the former media space this summer, simply due to both shortages of supplies and kind of COVID staffing issues for those that are going to do the install. We've had to push that back slightly. It will be being installed this next year. And then again, we will continue to serve as a childcare site for evening adult basic education programming and for those adults who want to participate in programming that is happening as part of the Greenbelt Park Community School. And a lot of that adult programming in the evenings does happen at the Northfield Community. So with that, I will take, these are, you have all seen the playground at the Northfield Community Education Center, which we know we are very excited about. This past week, Landscape Structures came out to photograph the playground. The playground will be featured along with some students from the program in the January 2022 catalog for Landscape Structures. So that is an exciting nod to how wonderful that playground is as well. With that, I will take any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Erin. Board members, questions, comments? Amy?
Hi, Erin. Thank you for the report. I've always loved hearing about what you're doing. I have a couple comments, questions for you. For the free farmers market, is that actually, I noticed it takes place on Tuesdays and Fridays. Is that after the actual farmers market on Riverside intentionally? Do you get the leftovers from them, or how does that work?
So, yeah, so the Community Action Center runs this farmer's market. It starts at 3:30 on these days. So they are most of the food is from local farmers, whether it's coming from the farmer's market that's earlier in the day, Amy, I'm not, to be
Well,
honest, I'm
if
not
you haven't made that connection, that might be one you would think of,
Sure.
that they might be happy to find a place to take surplus produce that didn't sell at the farmer's market that they picked that day. So
I will share that with them.
then the other question I had was about sort of your community ed goals. And I know you have the Ready for K. And do you ever think of doing any testing to see if those kids are ready for kindergarten, or would that be completely inappropriate because it's a different style program through ECFE? Do you ever have any more numbers associated with community ed and what you're looking to do other than stay within the budget, which is great?
We really focus, now that we're in the Northfield Community Education Center, we had focused this site improvement plan on the building. So you're right, the community ed as a whole encompasses much, much more than just what happens in the building, but we had chosen to focus the site improvement plan on the programs that are happening in the building. As far as ECFE, so part of when we pull the data, so what you were seeing in the graphs, we do need a certain sample size, cohort size. So if it's too small, where you could potentially tell a student who a student might be in their ability in that chart, we would not share that publicly. And the way ECFE operates, we operate essentially 3 individual sessions over the school year. So we could see a child in one session and not necessarily see them in the other 2 sessions. And so to make a correlation necessarily that 5 hours a week of ECFE programming was the full contributor or the highest contributor to being ready to kindergarten might be more of a stretch than when we're seeing children on a very regular basis. That makes sense?
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Tom?
Thanks, Erin. This is maybe a question for you and Dr. Hillman. When is MAP assessment going to be changed?
In terms of Tom,
Well, if you're setting goals based on MAP assessment and you're going to change it and you don't know what some of those results might be, so 80% in MAP might not translate to 80% in the new goal
right, so
setting.
as we are looking at what's the right, as we continue to review what the right assessment is to use at our elementary school, as we know, we've used MAP for years, we're looking at some different pieces. We would adjust those school improvement goals to be in line with what the new assessment would be. So we're using MAP right now because that's what we've had. And as we transition to the Renaissance product that looks like is what we're going to transition to, we'll do some adjustments to the plans. When Aaron has to write this plan, we weren't quite ready to make that call yet. So we would of course make any adjustments, and we would use the new vendor to be able to help us say, okay, on the map, this is what our goal was. What would be a reasonable similar goal given your particular product? So as we keep looking at those online tools to help us assess where our students are at academically, we would crosswalk those goals, Tom.
And Tom, we do have a little history of that too, because we used to use the FAST assessment for those of you who remember. And so we have tracked this long enough that we've moved already once from FAST to MAP. And so we do have some experience, and hope is also very helpful in how we would align those goals when we do make a move to another assessment.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? No.
Thank you for your report. The work you do with the kids is probably the most time thing you can do for kids that age. Thank you.
Well said, Noel. Thank you, Erin. When you think about you having to transition to a new building last year and some of the, just getting to learn how to utilize the building and your staff, and you have just done an incredible job, and your numbers in terms of the early ventures and what you're doing for those students and how well they are prepared for kindergarten is just really phenomenal. It's such great work. I had a couple questions. What programs are we providing transportation for?
Are you talking about these summer programs?
Yes.
So we provide we have provided it for Plus and Blast. Bridges to Kindergarten and Jumpstart to First Grade, which have not started yet, but will start on the week of August 23rd, also have transportation provided. And we provided transportation for ESY for the extent.
So I thought I had recalled that the district was providing transportation for hand in hand.
We do it
Preschool?
during the school year. That's
During the
yeah,
school
It's
year.
not running this
Okay.
summer, sorry. In the
Okay.
school year, yes.
Because that was just piloted a couple years ago, so it's been a couple years now. Okay. And then we continue to offer this year we're doing the full, as a new program, is a full day hand-in-hand preschool, which is really exciting.
Yeah, so one of our new offerings is we will continue to offer the 8 sections of preschool that we have always offered. Those are half-day sections, and they run anywhere from 2 half-days to 5 half-days a week. And then this year, we've also offered a full-day section, so it will run 8, full day being 8:45 to 3:45. So that is what would encompass our entire preschool day. We had put the 2 half-days together. We're very excited with.
That is
a
really
good
exciting.
amount of children in that program.
How
as well.
many students in that section
There's
currently?
11 students.
11. So what would your maximum be where you would consider another section?
Well, to add another section at this point might be a little difficult,
Sure.
hiring a staff as we get closer. But I mean, I think what we want to gauge this year is, would we get when we put it out there for people, were we going to get enough students to register? We would still take a couple more students in that section. We only have openings in a couple of slots there and a couple of slots in a Monday through Thursday afternoon. So we are down to a handful of slots opening in hand in hand. And we can only take 2 very part-time slots at Early Ventures right now. Otherwise, most Early Venture classrooms are full with a wait list.
Yes, that was going to be my next question, because we typically, you see a wait list for Early Ventures,
Yeah.
correct?
So I would say last fall was the only year we did not see a wait list, for all the understandable reasons.
Sure.
This year we are back to what I would say would be normal numbers with wait lists then for programs.
Okay. And then I had one other question. Oh, I know, it was talking about the legislature, and we did the Pathway 1 and 2 scholarships still came through. It's around $100,000.
Yep. So for Pathway 2 scholarships, we were awarded $105,000 for this fiscal year and next fiscal year. That renews for a 2-year cycle. Pathway 1 is, again, it's awarded to the family, and then the family will take those scholarship dollars and choose a 3 or 4-star rated program. So that can fluctuate year to year on what we receive. I mean, it fluctuates for a host of reasons, where people choose to go, how many awards we actually get in the county, because they, throughout the state, they award dollars kind of regionally. And so depending on how many are awarded to this part of the state compared to others, and how that balance between Northfield and Faribault also shakes out can vary year to year.
Sure. And then my last question, I know you were working hard to help area preschools achieve the 4-star parent aware rating. Are there any other preschools in our community with that rating to where they can access those scholarships?
Head Start would be the other 4-star
Okay.
rated.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you for your report. And as Noel said, thank you for the really vital work you do, and your staff is just incredible. So we thank you for the report and for all your work.
Thank you. We are thankful to be settled in a building and not moving this August.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our second report. We have Director of Student Activities, Joel Olson, who will present the school improvement plan for student activities. This is the first time Joel has presented a site improvement plan for school activities. So we welcome you and anxious to hear the report.
Thank you. Yeah, it's our first first time going through this, so I might fumble a little bit, so just please bear with me. We could start the slideshow presentation. Okay. So I'll do some key reflections, and with the help of Dr. Hillman, I was able to kind of come up with some highlights for the year. Basically, when I was thinking about what were our goals for last year, and in thinking about the tangible things, it was, let's get through seasons. Let's get through the fall, the winter, the spring, without having to quarantine, without having to end seasons and things like that. So we were able to do that in one way or another. In the fall, we were able to complete the regular seasons, but through the high school league, the playoff system was halted, but we were able to get through the regular seasons. The winter and the spring seasons, we were able to finish all the way through to state tournaments if teams made it that far. And I think as a goal to have that happen where we had to end everything a year ago or a year and a half ago with our spring not even being able to have a season, I think to have that as a goal was one that was attainable, and we were successful in doing so. 661 students participated in our activities last year. That's unduplicated. That means that a student is counted once. They might do 2 or 3 different activities, but we only count them once. So 661 students participated. The mother of necessity is not being able to have fans at some of our events. So we were able to partnership with the National Federation of High Schools Network. And we had 2 cameras installed, one on the Memorial Stadium and one in the gym. And we were able to broadcast all of our home events in those facilities. Over 18,000 live views from across not only our community, but across the country. We're able to watch activities or events at our school. Student participants achieved at a high level. There's many more to mention. I put a link to all of our state tournament participants. But some of the highlights, bowling and knowledgeable were state champs. Nate Stevens, a junior in our school, was a state golf champion this spring. Girls hockey, girls golf, boys swim and dive, volleyball, softball, wrestling were all Big 9 champs. Wrestling and boys soccer were also section champions and made it to the state tournament. And as you can see in that link, you'll see the multitude of other student athletes that have been in a state tournament. Not only do we strive to do well in the competitive areas, we try to do well in the classroom. And girls tennis and football received the gold award for GPA, team GPAs, and girls basketball and girls golf received the silver award. So those are a combined average of all your participants in that sport, their GPAs. So they're getting it done in the classroom as well. And we're pretty proud of that. We can go to the next slide. So even though we weren't part of, even though we're part of a unique, we're unique in the program we offer, we do make the connectedness goal part of our programs. So what we're doing this year, and we actually started it this summer, we met, a coaching staff met, and many of you know Why We Play is the program from the high school league that really talks about purpose and values and why do we offer programs for kids in high schools and education-based athletics. And we all have a purpose, and our coaches need to present that and have that as part of their professional development. The next step in that is to have a program purpose statement. And so our coaches met and we came up with 4 values that we believe are important for our students to have or to get no matter what program they are part of, and to develop purpose statements for not only each activity, but for our total department. So those are the things that we're working on from a department standpoint going into the next year. And what I'd like to do is have that put together for you by April of next year, where the natural progression of common language and purpose statements, and even getting to the point of what is it that we're looking for in coaches when we hire them and retain them? Do they fit that model of what's important for us and our values at Northfield? We're also working on another necessity is transition to online ticketing. What we found last year with having limited number of fans at games, the way to control access and the way to have touchless or cashless interactions was to do online ticketing. We piloted that last year. This year, we're trying to go into full implementation with that. And the Big Nine and the State High School League are also adopting that, the same company. So we're going to start that this fall, where you can buy your tickets online, just like you're going to go to a Twins game or the Guthrie or somewhere like that for tickets. Digital and online payments for officials and event workers. We did some research with the help of Val Murdesdorf on the cost of paper and the cost of staff time to process payments for officials and our school workers at events. And we found that that cost could be reduced significantly by going to a digital online payment system. And so with that system, we can pay officials directly and with the click of a button. And also with our school workers, people that work at our events, they can fill out an online form, and we take away the paper aspect of it, and we streamline the system from maybe days and just and it's a streamlined process right to our payroll and our accounts payable people. And then our last thing we're going to do is we've always done surveys of parents and students, but we're going to be more purposeful this year in that after each season, those surveys are going to go out and get that data and then break that down. So when I meet with coaches after each season, we can go through the what's going well, what's not going well, and what can we work on. So we can go to the next slide. We'll collaborate with the high school on the connectedness goal. I think that ties in very well with our Why We Play initiative with why do we coach? Why do we offer programs for kids? It's to connect with kids and provide opportunities with caring adults that are there for kids, that sometimes for some of those kids might be the highlight of their day is to participate in one of our programs. And so we just need to know that it's not all about the wins and the losses. It's not about the scoreboard. It's about connecting with kids and providing a safe place for them to be every day. Online ticketing and official game worker payments, streaming events, we're going to continue to do that and continue to make that even better and more accessible. And again, the surveys conducted at the conclusion of each season. One more. And that's it. Any questions?
Excellent. Thank you. Questions, comments, board members have? Amy?
So I think it's exciting that you're moving toward online ticketing. And I'm just wondering, is that going to end up increasing the price of the tickets, or what will the advantage be for the spectator? For
the ticket prices are, there's fees associated with it. So the tickets actually will be $7 and $5 compared to $6 and $4. There's a dollar fee that the company keeps, and that there's a credit card surcharge that goes out as well. So in working with Val, we're going to streamline that and get that down to, I think the board has said that we will, if there's a fee for credit cards, the district will absorb that cost. And so by increasing the price to 7 and 5, that dollar that the company charges will actually then still be at a $6 revenue stream for the district.
So one advantage would be it would allow people to pay with their credit or debit cards.
Correct.
Will they still be able to pay with cash or will it all go online?
We're going to transition. So this year we'll probably have a window open or a table there for people that aren't aware of it yet and that might not have that accessibility. But hopefully by 2022 in the fall, we're fully online with just completely buy tickets online.
And thank you for your presentation tonight. I have another question, but it'll be at the end of this, okay?
All right, thank you. Other questions, comments?
To follow up what Amy was saying, so if someone came to a football game and they hadn't bought the ticket ahead of time, could they get in?
Yep, we'll have a ticket window open.
Okay. And same for everything else. And will you maybe take e-currency off a phone or something?
We would love to be able to have a point of sale at the ticket booth where if you came and didn't have cash and we could have you buy a ticket like that. We're not capable of that yet, but that would be something I'd love to be able to do. But otherwise, we'll have QR codes at the gate so people could scan that and then pay for a ticket right there at the gate as well.
Okay. And then another question, you had 661 students. Does that include any from the middle school?
That was just the high school. And I preface that by saying there's some programs like swimming and cross country that do have seventh and eighth and ninth graders there. So some of those students were counted in that number. Sports like soccer and volleyball, tennis, those have separate middle school programs. So I did not include those in that count. So there is more.
Okay.
And actually with last year, we didn't run some of those programs because of the COVID protocols. So it's probably relatively accurate with the numbers that we were able to have last year.
Yeah. Oh, okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Well, yeah. Dr. Hill?
Joel, I really am excited about the work that you're going to do in terms of the parent feedback to continuously improve for X. So would you just talk a little bit about the 3-2-1 report that we've discussed and how you're going to make sure that the feedback is shared back with the parents from the coaches? Could you just talk about that a little briefly? I think that's a template that we're using throughout the district in a lot of ways, and the activities department, in an effort to try to make the experience better for students and for families, is adopting that continuous improvement strategy. So I would just like you to explain for folks what the 3-2-1 report is.
So the questions that'll go out to parents and students will be, probably 8 or 10 questions that kind of cover the experience and things like that. But when the information comes back, we're gonna, break that down into the top 3 things that went well, top 2 things that we can look to improve upon, and what is the one thing that we're really going to focus on for that coach for the next year. And so at the end of each season, that'll be the meeting. Basically the agenda for the meeting when I meet with the coaches is bringing those things up and having them and I work together on a plan as we move forward into the next season.
And board members, I highlight this because I think it's really important when we are in a program like activities where there's a lot of qualitative data, right? A lot of feedback to coaches and to the activities department about their experience. How can we put that in a way that's measurable, where we can also share what that feedback was, taking that qualitative data, making it somewhat quantitative, and then showing that we're taking people's feedback to make improvement. I think that that's something that, we've always been very serious about when we do parent feedback surveys. You've seen a number of those reports, and I'm proud that the activities department is going to take that extra step this year. They've always done a disaggregation of their data and provided it to their coaches in a thematic way, but I think this takes another step to make sure that families and student athletes know that their feedback has been activated.
Yeah, that's really excellent. And that was a question I had too, because I think that the parent and student piece and providing that feedback is really important. And, because you're here, of course, we have to thank you for the work you did last year. It was hard. There was tough decisions. You were not only concerned with the safety of our students, but also spectators. So we just really are so grateful for your work and for how well you did it. It was very, very difficult. So thank you for that. And it is really exciting to have you here doing a site improvement plan. I mean, we talk all the time about how co-curricular is such an incredibly important part of our students' life and their development, and to have this come into the fold and work with the district initiative like the 321 is really excellent. I was always interested in Minnesota State High School League Why We Play initiative. I think that it's a really strong initiative. I was happy to hear that you're going to work through some vision. You have some vision for that and some purpose statements that you'll develop, and we're anxious to see that in April. How much support does the high school league give you when you contact them and say, I need this? Do they have curriculum that you can use, or what kind of support do you get from the high school league? And how have you seen Why We Play evolve since they first introduced that initiative?
It's become, so it's interesting that it's got to be 8, 9 years ago now that a small group of ADs, and I was one of those ADs that came together to read the book by Joe Orman. We just were going to do a book study. And that was the genesis of this movement. And it's grown into this national movement now that I don't know, I don't know what the percentage of NFL cities are, but that's how they gauge implementation into programs in those states that use this program. And we are up until the COVID pandemic, we would meet about once every 2 months, professional development with ADs, and went through curriculum, and then we could bring those back to coaches. And so it's very extensive, and the work that that the high school league and now the Why We Play team that's out there going nationally provides incredible support, and the collegiality and the work we do as ADs with each other. I can call up any number of ADs in the state and say, how are you doing this? So if they've been through this process of determining specific sport or activity purpose statements, how did that process look, and how did it go, and how can I learn from you? And so it's just an amazing common language piece that all of the ADs know that, and we use that. And the support from the high school league has been unbelievable with their help, and continuing to provide us resources to make this progression of just my own journey to bringing coaches along that journey, and then bringing our district along to that in that journey. But it's pretty amazing.
It is really, thank you. Excellent. I did not realize you were as part of
It's
when it,
interesting.
yeah, I did not
Yeah.
realize that this, because the previous activities director, Tom Groutman, had presented that when it was somewhat, I think, in its infancy at the high school league, and we all were able to read the Joe Erdman
Yep.
book. And so, yeah, it was really good. So that's great to have the update. Thank you. And then the one thing I did also want to compliment you on is the work you did on the website for the activities department. I think it's great that parents can pull it up. It's right there. And it's great. It almost reminds me of a high school course catalog, because you can go through each of the sports and kind of see what's happening. And so I think it's great. What kind of guidelines do you give the coaches to put information for each of their sport or activity on the website?
It's make sure you have your contact information in there, because the questions will come about, that sometimes we can't answer. So at least have an email in there that people can send an email to, especially in the fall. What are these practices before school starts? What do they look like? What's the schedule look like? Make sure those are in there. And then handbooks, schedules, practice schedules, calendars, so there's a variety of ways, and it's a very user-friendly site to drop and drag things in there. And so the basics that we'd like them to have is contact information, schedules, and if they do have a handbook, otherwise put our handbook in there. We have the Big 9 handbook and the State High School League handbook, and then different forms, things like that are available. So it's a very user-friendly site. Some are better at it than others. Some are technologically adept, and some need some help. But I tell them, I said, whenever you need me to do something for you, I can do it in a couple of minutes and throw it in there for you. So So it's a constant work and try to improve that for each of the activities as well. And but yeah, I think it's a great tool for us. It's passive. I'd like to be more proactive in getting information out there and not overburdening people with communications, but making them pertinent and timely, and especially coming up where if there's a pitch to tell our folks that the 13th, which is this Friday at 3 o'clock, the registration to be able to start on Monday will close. So if you haven't registered yet, make sure you do that. Does not say that you can't register, but you couldn't practice on Monday if you're not. So, but things like that we want to make sure people are aware of.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a really great website. I think that was all my questions. Thank you for your great work. I know a week from today, we start the fall season. And I know you have a parent meeting for the
on
19th.
Thursday.
Maybe just describe quickly what you try to cover at the parent meeting, which is scheduled for August 19th.
Yep, next Thursday. So my one and only time of doing this, since last year we didn't have it, we had over 600 parents there and student athletes, and all of our coaches for the fall are there. And our so basically the small agenda that I present is just welcoming them back to our school in the fall, and getting them excited about having them there, giving them some information about what the fall looks like. Visit our purpose, visit some of the things we've been working with as a coaching staff. And then we have our rally students, some of our rally students speak to the families and just talk about what it means to be a Raider and what that means to be, how much that means to them to be in our programs. And then we break them out to go to their specific fall sports, and then they meet with their coaches that night. And this year we're adding sort of a kind of an activity fair. So I've invited any of our activities that have, that might not have an opportunity to meet before the school year starts to meet. So tables are available. So like robotics and other activities like that, we'll have a table there. So if students are interested, they can go talk to our robotics advisors and other activities to get started before the school year gets going, where they might miss it, in a communication or something like that. So that'll be a new thing we're going to do this year.
Yeah, that's really excellent. Thank you. Amy, did you have a question? Amy.
So first, I meant to thank you for the crazy year that you had last year, trying to keep all of this different students safe in all of the different sports, and they're all different. And my question has to do about, I'm looking ahead on the agenda for tonight.
Mhm.
And one of the things you're asking us to approve is overnight field trips for athletes. And I am just wondering, I know you're still waiting for guidance for the Minnesota State High School League, but one of these field trips is just 2 weeks away with 50 students. And what is your thinking about how to, what COVID protocols might be appropriate on this trip, what you're thinking of doing, what would happen if someone came down with COVID in the middle of the trip? Just what are you thinking?
Yeah, I talked to both coaches that are getting submitted tonight, and I just said, can you guys kind of give me some thoughts of what you were thinking to see if it kind of meshes with what I'm thinking. And so the one of the questions was, will students, chaperones, and coaches have to wear masks? They will on the bus. That's a mandate. And if those are the expectations at the whether it's at the site or at the hotel or wherever they're at, they will follow those mandates. We will be masking anytime we're inside the building. If they do team building, things like that, they're going to do that outside. So anytime of large group gathering, they will be outside to do that. There'll be 4 to a room, non-related. That's been a typical system of putting kids together for overnights, things like that. If someone gets sick, a parent will be called. Students will ride home with them. This will be written into the form that all kids and parents must return before going on the trip. And the trip is not mandatory. It's a voluntary trip. COVID protocols. One of the coaches said we've talked about only allowing vaccinated students to go along, but that's something that they would want guidance on from a higher above than them. And then if parents are welcome to come along, and if they want to get a hotel room and have their students stay with them, they can do that. So that was just some kind of quick conversation with the coaches today about, what are we thinking? And as we get the guidance, we have a high school league meeting tomorrow, a Zoom meeting. I'm hoping that we'll get some information from them. But again, it'll come, I think, at a local district level about what, what we think is safe protocols and things like that.
Just a follow-up question. So if a student gets sick in Iowa, the parents will have to drive down to Iowa and pick up the student?
That's what this coach is thinking about, yes.
Okay, 'cause that just seems like if they're ready to come home and they have to wait for a student to come down there, it might
Right.
get complicated, but
Right.
I'm glad you're thinking about all of these things because I'm sort of a belt and suspenders person, if you plan for it, it won't happen.
Right.
So, thank you
These are
for,
great questions that I'm glad that we get to dig into those more so we can have further conversation about what those are and have them down before they even leave.
okay, thank you very much.
Jeff?
Yeah, as the liaison for sports and activities on the board here, I'm just glad to have you here, and we just adopted into family, being a Falcon, so we're glad to have you over here. Just wondering on the, whole COVID issue, you've got the Minnesota State High School League, which I'm the liaison for as well. Where do these COVID policies come in? Because I know we joined the league and we have to correspond with what the league is. So with school districts, the way it's set up, with the huge dysfunction that it is right now with these policies being set, which really should be set by the state, if you want to ask me, but what conflict is this going to cause going from whatever else? You're not requiring football players to wear masks, are you? Or you're outside, you're not wearing a mask. And who has the, is it, when you're wherever you're at, is it the school district where you're playing, or is it the Minnesota State High School League that's making?
I'm not gonna assume the conversation tomorrow, but I have a feeling that a lot of it will be some general guidelines. There won't be any mandates from the high
Right.
school league. I think it'll be local decisions.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. And my position would be to follow through that and honor the parents, the students, and the athletes, and just, I would hope it would be voluntary, but especially outside, it's getting a little bit ridiculous. I played a lot of different sports, but was a, good football player, and I couldn't see wearing a mask playing football. It'd be just insane. But, I don't know. It's just we're in kind of a startup season here, and I think we'll kind of work through this stuff once we get started again. It'll kind of gel a little bit, and it might be a little bit weird starting out. But, I think if districts work together and the league works together, you'll figure it out in
And
a
as I
short
get-
period of time.
And as I get my information and updates, I talk to Dr. Hellman and brief him on the updates, and then we have conversation about next steps.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Good luck with this season. Okay, we'll move on to our next item for discussion, which is Portage handbooks. The proposed handbook, this is first reading and was in your board packet. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, I'm not going to take a lot of time to go through these two handbooks. It is the first reading. When we had you adopt the other handbooks earlier this spring, we had not yet received the full formal approval from the Minnesota Department of Education to have a state-approved online program. So once we received that formal approval to have the state-approved online program, we started the process of doing all the other kinds of things that we do for a regular school. So we set up the handbooks and we got those pieces going. And so this is the first reading this evening. You're going to notice that they fall in very similar way to all of the other handbooks that we have. Give you an update. We're just above 60 students enrolled in Portage at this point. Being a state-approved online program, we are able to accept students from other districts, and we have started to see we have some of our first open enrolled students into the Portage program. And we also now are getting some additional inquiries from folks. Being on that state-approved list is pretty important. So the handbooks this evening are the first reading. I know that some members of the policy committee have also provided some feedback for us on that. And we will go ahead and move ahead with any feedback that you have and then ask you to approve those at the next meeting.
Excellent, thank you. Questions or comments on the Portage handbook? Okay, thank you. It's just great that we have this document and, it works so well and it makes this so official, and it's just really exciting that we have the Portage program. Okay, so our next item for discussion is superintendent goals. Dr. Hillman has a draft of his proposed goals for 2021, 2022. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, so each year the board asks me to set several goals that I will work on during the year, but of course, in addition to all of the other kinds of things that we're working on in terms of implementing the strategic plan and pursuing the goals that are outlined in the world's best workforce. We've been you'll notice there was an error at the bottom that I appreciate Tom pointing out. We've been doing construction for so long that we left construction on, though we're very thankful that we get to take that last sentence off, that our construction and renovation projects are done. And we are grateful for the results, and we're also grateful to have to be able to take it off of the goals for the year. So I'm presenting 4 draft goals for you. And they are really this year, again, as you know, in the first several years of my superintendency, we really focused on some very specific and actionable quantitative based goals. And of course, as we're in this process of emerging from the pandemic, we're looking at how do we set our sights for the future. So we're looking at 4 different goals. One is about facilitating an inclusive process that we began last spring and will continue into this year to update our strategic plan. And the strategic plan is 5 years old now. It's going into its 6th year. We think it's really important to make sure that we get from the community what are the things that they would like to see us have accomplished within the next 5 years. We think that that's really important. We're asking people to put it in a very quantitative way. What are quantitative goals that you would like to see the school district achieve in the next 5 years? So we did a lot of that with staff in the spring. As people are starting to pay more attention to the school year, we'll run several sessions for the community. They'll give us that feedback. I will work with our administrative team to bring forth to you a strategic plan that will include some specific goals in our 5 strategic commitment areas. We will also then, based on that, use an inclusive process to develop a 5-year funding priority plan. So we think it's really important to be good stewards of our taxpayer dollars and to make sure that our taxpayer dollars are being used to facilitate the achievement of the goals in the strategic plan. And so we are going to be working with folks and really building the budget from the ground up. So we're going to say, what is the strategic plan? What are our strategic goals? We'll work with you as a board to say, what are the must-haves? What are the things that every school needs to have? And then as we build that budget for what is intended to be a 5-year budget plan, we'll put those things in that the community and that you feel are the most important until we're at a point where we feel that we can sustain that budget for the next 5 years. As you know, we're very fortunate to have great local support, but 70% of our funding comes from the state. And I don't need to talk with you about how that has not been a reliable source of increased funding for us over time. So Director Val Murdersdorf and I have been working on a plan to build a budget from the ground up that we think can be sustainable for 5 years. And so we will have that presented to you by March 14th. And of course, we are always balancing the short-term needs of the district with the long-term financial viability. Part of that will be discussing fund balance and what's the right appropriate goal for fund balance. The third goal will continue a goal that we've had for the last couple of years, really around building capacity to support the district's anti-racism framework. Last year, we set an anti-racism framework totally focused on making sure that we can eliminate the achievement gap, an unacceptable issue that we have in Minnesota, the worst achievement gap in the nation. And so last year we worked on developing that framework that looks at things like symbolism, individual behavior, and systemic behavior. And the framework is intended to make intentional connections with families of color. Again, focus on symbolism, systemic behavior, and individual behavior. And again, looking to reduce those academic and social emotional disparities within the district. So we are going to move from that part of where we are really looking at the issue to working with our PLCs into specific actions that we believe will now see results in terms of academic and social emotional reduction in those disparities between students of color and our white students, again, as is the case across the rest of Minnesota. And then the fourth goal is something, again, another process goal this year. Our curriculum review cycle is antiquated by nearly any way that you look at it. And so there's just no way anymore that we can have a 7-year curriculum review cycle. We are required to teach the state standards. That's the key component. But we know that adapting our content and our instructional practices is something that has to be a much more ongoing process. So our instructional services department is working hard to develop an updated content and instructional review cycle. We're going to present that to you by December 13th. Again, the important part is what are the things that we're looking at? How often are we looking at them? And then how are we resourcing it, right? So the key thing is it used to be that you'd look at a curriculum review cycle and every 7 years a curriculum area would get to purchase new textbooks, right? Well, that really isn't something that is really the way that we do things anymore. We're of course still using textbooks and other resources, but there's a lot of other digital and other online resources that we're using that we have the ability to update more frequently. So we think that that's really important, and we're going to present something different to you by December 13th. And again, we're proud of what instructional services is doing in that area. So those are the goals as we look at them for this coming school year. They are a draft, so I certainly would take any feedback that board members have and adjust them accordingly.
Excellent, thank you. Comments or questions board members have on Dr. Hillman's proposed superintendent goals? Okay. I really like these goals and, you know, we don't talk about curriculum review often, you're right. And the instructional review, I think that's a really strong goal. And I really liked when I saw it there. My question there is, so we always, like you alluded to the state standards and how they review that. So I'm envisioning that will have to obviously work with the cycle and how that gets rolled out.
Yeah, for sure. The legislature this time around also pushed back all of the official standard review by 2 years. So for example, the mathematics standards won't be reviewed, they won't be implemented again for nearly another 10 years now. So we can't wait 10 years for the state to look at the math curriculum, right? So that is something that we're actually looking at starting this year. And the intent of the local content and instructional review cycle will be to be able to address those kinds of things in real time.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so thank you for those goals, and we'll vote on those and approve those at our next board meeting. Next and last item for report is the operations update by Dr. Hillman.
Yes, so I'm gonna go start off. We usually have started as the COVID update last summer when we would give you an update on data and all those kinds of things the entire summer long. I'm gonna hold off on that part until we do the next component a little bit later. But I did include some of the latest data for you in my report this time. I'm gonna shift to the second part, which is summer construction projects. And so while we're very thankful to have the large projects behind us over the last couple of years, we still are doing a number of things this summer. I just want to share a few of those items with you. I want to thank Jim Colseth, our Director of Buildings and Grounds, and our retired Director of Buildings and Grounds, and then also thank Cole Nelson, who's our new Director of Buildings and Grounds, who has hit the ground running. And here are just a handful of the construction projects that are happening this summer. We want to make sure that we continue to take care of those facilities so that they do not become dilapidated. We of course take care of what we have. And so you're going to notice that because we've done a lot at the elementary schools over the last few years, this year the focus is really on the high school and the middle school overall. So something that I think is going to be good news to every high school student is that almost all of the restrooms at the high school are being updated. There's new tiling on the walls and floors, updated plumbing and fixtures installed. Some of those restrooms go all the way back to the beginning of the building. In some cases, some of the restrooms have been expanded in size to increase the number of stalls. If you talk to recent graduates who hear that we're doing this, they say, oh my goodness, they were so terrible. It was iconic. We need to leave them that way. But that, of course, is not how things happen. So we continue to try to do those updates as we move forward. Again, focusing on how do we use space for instructional purposes. S101, which is a science classroom focused on chemistry. That is an update that was probably done in the early 90s. It was kind of an odd configuration. We're teaching chemistry in that room now. The gas jets weren't appropriately placed. So what we're excited about is that science room has been completely redone. They now are using flexible and mobile furniture that can both serve as student seating and then can also go against the sides, the countertops, and turn into a laboratory station. And so there's an updated fume hood, and the gas jets have been appropriately placed for that content area. At Northfield High School, you're all aware of that, the fact that we're now here at the district office. The former district office, the high school, is being updated to it's repurposed, and it's going to be used for several different things. And the cascading effect of this is pretty impressive. So we're looking at new instructional space for Torch, that's tackling obstacles and raising college hopes. That's our first generation college student support program. Also, the board has heard multiple times about the multi-tiered system of support program. That will also be part of the old district office remodeling. In addition, there will be dedicated space for credit recovery. That's a program to help students keep up to date in terms of not to wait until summer school for them to be able to get back on track. So there's going to be an actual space for that. And then in addition, there is also going to be part of the offices that will be turned into space, offices, a work area, and storage space for the technology services department, which you probably never see in their office because it is an old storage room. So by redoing the district office, the former district office, we are able to free up 4 classrooms and a storage space. And so that's a pretty significant use of that space. We're thankful to Wold for helping us with that design. It's on track. We are actually pretty impressed how we're able to get almost everything done. I'm told that the door hardware for one of the doors is going to be very tight, like just before the school year starts. There are a lot of materials that are back ordered due to a number of different things that are a lot of which is pandemic related. And so we're just waiting for that. Of course, we were very fortunate because Knutson Construction, who is already there to do the bathrooms, was able to take on this construction project as well. So we didn't have the labor shortage that some others have, but we've been walking through there, and when it's completed and board members have a chance to see it, it doesn't look anything like what the old space was. So that's another really great piece that we've done this summer. Again, Northfield Middle School, a lot of times people hear about the middle school and they think, wow, that's the new middle school. And the new middle school, of course, is now 15 or so years old, right? Even more than that, almost getting closer to 20 years old. So there is work that we're doing each summer, one of which this summer we did replace the windows in the swimming pool area. Those windows needed to be updated. There's some other work that has been done in the swimming pool area to make sure that the maintenance is done appropriately so that we are ahead of any kind of problem, any issues before they become a real problem. So those new windows in the swimming pool area are something that was very well received by the middle school and the swimming programs. And then we continue to work on, every year we take on a handful of projects, and most of the schools were dehumidified or what some people would call air conditioning 10 or 12 years ago. But for whatever reason, the gymnasiums were not at that time. And the gymnasiums are, of course, classrooms. They're classrooms. And they're also, we use every gym, as Director of Community Services Aaron Bailey can attest to. We use nearly every gym year round. And so having all of the gyms dehumidified is an important piece to make sure that the public has access to those spaces in a way that's comfortable and safe, especially as we've seen some really hot streaks this summer. And we know that that is something that's been happening for the last, for quite some time now. And so we did add dehumidification this summer to the 2 gymnasiums at the middle school and also at Bridgewater. That leaves the high school gyms as the high school gym is the only area that is athletic related that it is not dehumidified. And that is anticipated to be coming up in the next year or so. So I just wanted to walk through those, some of those construction projects that we've done this summer. Again, most of them done with Knutson Construction, some of them done by ourselves in terms of, or a combination thereof. And then the final part of my report this evening is just, I'm committed to trying to share with you, some bright spots and some things that are interesting that I don't think people are always aware of. And so, for several years, we've had a commitment to increasing the visibility of the trades and specifically career technical education and trying to encourage more and more students to be able to pursue a career in the trades. And so when we've looked at this previously, we just don't have the same industry in our community that other communities have. So we had to look, who do we have as partners who could be ongoing partners that we can sustain, regardless of what the economy is. And so we've seen some situations where you may have a partner company, and then if the economy dips, we just don't have the same support or partnership that we did when the economy was really good. So we really looked internally. We've done a number of pieces. The one I'm going to highlight tonight is our apprentice electrician. So for the last 3 or 4 years, Duke Bjorkland, who is our district's master electrician, when we were talking about how to increase access to the trades, Duke said, well, my master electrician license would allow me to have an apprentice. I can have one apprentice. And so for the last at least 3 years, we've been hiring typically a very recent Northfield High School graduate to serve as the electrician's apprentice. This summer it was 2021 graduate Tommy Rice. I got to visit with Tommy as he was actually working in that chemistry lab that I mentioned. He was working on some of the electrical components there. So that's one example of how beyond our industrial technology classes, beyond our business and our family consumer science classes, how we're trying to give students a real opportunity to test out. Now, it's only one kid, and I get that, but we have some other things that we continue to work on to be able to control our own destiny with that and give some students a real opportunity for real work to see if that is the kind of career that we'd like. And, you know, Duke wouldn't have to do this. This is not something that he has to do, right? But he says, yep, this is a really good thing because I know we need more electricians. And we've had several over the last few years who have gone, and they've done really meaningful work. So a lot of school districts have had to pay some pretty significant dollars to bring in companies to help update to LED lighting. Over the last several years, our electrician apprentices have helped significantly in updating our buildings to LED lighting. And so that's an example of the actual real work that's getting done by someone in our electrical apprentice program. And so again, something that's the summer, it's not a class, but again, this is another way that we're really trying to focus on helping give students who want that opportunity to pursue something in the trades an opportunity to do so. So that is the report for this evening. And as I said, I'll come back and share some of the other pieces from the COVID update as we get to the agenda item later.
Excellent. Thank you. Questions or comments? Amy?
It's always exciting to see the construction projects happening and that we're not deferring maintenance, we're staying on top of the maintenance of our building. And along that line, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to give us a tour of the high school at the end of the summer when those changes are done, because I think it would be really interesting to see those changes. And I think we'll be hearing about those from the community as well.
Yeah, we'd be delighted to give you a tour once they're done. It's one of those things where, as you all know, construction projects can look like they're coming along really quickly. And then as you're waiting for things, they can stall out for a little bit. In our district, they've typically always been done on time, but we know that this one, because of just when we were able to finalize the planning in early April, I believe it was, it's something that's just taking some time. So this one's going to run right up against the clock. And we know most of it's going to be done. There are going to be some things that may not be exactly how we want them at the start of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Tom?
When do the gym floors need to get replaced, and were they affected by the humidity up until we're making the changes there?
Yes, Mr. Olson has just left, so I can't ask him this question. Most of our gym floors have been redone fairly recently. Jeff, you probably even know from being on the committee. You want to share that?
No, I mean, that's probably one of the few improvements we've made is the gym floor hadn't been replaced for, 40 years. We just did that a couple years ago. So that gym floor in the senior high is beautiful. I mean, I don't think, weather's affected it lately, but that's very nice. I mean, what other gym floors are you talking about?
I think Tom is asking about, and they are on a cycle. I mean, we do the basic maintenance every summer in terms of, or at least once a year, we do that basic maintenance of the stripping and the refinishing. And then on a fairly regular cycle, they will get resanded. And of course, we're very fortunate that many of those floors are fairly new and have been kept up to date. So we don't have, to my knowledge, and I'm going to look at Erin Bailey because she runs those gyms. Why don't you come to the podium, Erin, because Erin runs the gyms all the time. I have not heard any issues of warping or buckling or anything like that.
No, gyms have there's been some warm gyms this summer, as Matt has mentioned. Anytime we have stretches of 90 degrees for multiple days, they get warm. We haven't, the level of replacing a gym floor like what Jeff is talking about at the high school. The high school gym floor is the most recently one with a full refit. We do a full replacement of the floor. We do finish the floors. So we wax and finish the floors every year. So every gym is on a cycle. So some are done in the summer, and then some are actually done now on winter or spring break, because that actually works better for them to be used than for programming in the summer. So every gym though has a regular cycle. So, and except the only one that didn't get is the gym upstairs here, but that was done as part of the construction project. So that didn't get done then in this last year, but use has also gone down.
And the gym that's upstairs here at the district offices, I'd really call it a throwback gym. I mean, You gotta, it's got the half court line where you have to come back to the free throw line. So it's used for things like dodgeball and some
Love it
other.
for some community education programs, but other things it has about a foot from the court line to a very hard wall. So it's
Yeah.
very limited on what you can use.
It's a very cool gym. I coached in several gyms like it in southeastern Minnesota over my time, and where the end line is right up against the wall. So
When I went to school, that would be called the girls' gym. And we had the boys' gym. That's how old I am. But, actually, my question, I guess, was with the humidity. I mean, the floor is sealed, so that probably protects it, but, I mean, it's a good thing that we're dehumidifying those spaces because I could see humidity possibly ruining the wood or whatever on the floor, so.
And
that was.
I think the other part that sometimes people forget is, I think, in the way that we look at gymnasiums, I think oftentimes we think of them as something additional or extra, right? Because we think of them as places where we hold extracurricular activities. But what we know is physical education is a very important part of our curriculum, especially at the elementary level. I mean, we have real advocacy to make sure that elementary kids get Phy-Ed 4 days a week, and they generally do. They have a little bit of a different schedule last year, have a longer period, but they're looking at doing their best to return to those pre-2020 schedules. So those gyms are classrooms. Not everybody always thinks that way, right? They think, oh, that's the gym, but they really are a classroom. And so making sure that we are keeping those up to date. And we're very fortunate in this district. I think people who have visited other districts will be able to tell you that to have the level of gymnasiums that we have, even in our elementary buildings, where they're in general competition size, they're well kept, that is not usual. You go to many elementary schools and you'll see kind of a tile floor in the gym because it also doubles as a cafeteria. So we're very fortunate to have the size gyms that we have and the ability to use them for our community programming. And we do take care of them, which is I think, essential.
Thanks, Tom. Noel, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, my experience is that most gym floors have a significant amount of insulation below them. Usually have 2-3 inches of foam board, partly for resilience, but also for humidity. So the issue of humidity is usually from the top down. And if they're sealed, they're protected.
Yeah, and our buildings and grounds team does an excellent job, maintain, because again, it's very expensive to replace a gym floor and very difficult to repair it if you have an issue.
Okay, thank you for the report. It was really exciting to hear, and we've been updated all along, but to know that space at the high school is such a premium, and I think it's just a really excellent use of that space. And then we have the additional counselor who's moving in with the athletic department, and they're moving over to the previous counselor. So there's shifts being made, but every square inch is being utilized, and I think that the decision to put those to how best to utilize the former district office is just really excellent. So it will be fun to see those spaces. So thank you. Okay, that was our last item for reports. So we can move on to the consent agenda. As you know, there were some personnel items that were added to, or personnel items in the table file that were added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from consent grouping for separate consideration? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Tom. Is there a second? Second by Corey. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we will move on to items for individual action. We have 2 this evening. Our first item is our school bus contract with Benjamin Bus. I'll ask for a motion to approve the contract, and then Val Murdisdorf is here to answer any questions regarding the contract. So is there a motion to approve the school bus transportation contract with Benjamin Bus Incorporated for 2021 through 2023 as presented? Moved by Amy. Is there a second? Second by Jeff. Questions or comments for Val on the contract? Yes, Tom.
On point number 13, it talks that the school district shall approve any and all school bus routes, stops, drivers, and alternate drivers. Does that So I guess my question is, do we hire the drivers? Do we vet them? No, but it says that we approve them. So does that make us liable for those drivers who are hired?
My little red light's not coming on, so hopefully it's on. It sounds like it is. I think the language says shall, right? So I think that it gives us the option to, should we have concerns that Benjamin Bus wasn't following the appropriate procedures, but actually as a certified bus company, their hiring process is actually much more elaborate than ours. Even their background check is much more significant. They have to go through all sorts of tests. Privately, they're required to do it. They also have to do one for the state for that license. So I don't have any concerns that that's happening. It just gives us the ability, should we have concerns. But in my tenure here, we have not done that. So I think the language just allows us to do that in the future, should we have concern.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. Great question, Tom. Any other questions or comments on the contract? We did review this at our previous board meeting. So, okay. So we do have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our next item for individual action is to approve COVID-19 safety protocols as presented. I think I'll have Dr. Hillman outline those for the 2021-22 school year, and then we'll have a motion on this item. And just as a reminder, there was the revised health and safety resolution in our table file. So Dr. Hillman.
Yeah, and to begin with, I'm going to share what the difference was between the resolution that was in the packet and the resolution that was in the table file. And so just two minor differences, actually. One, we added a piece around waiting for the state high school league prior to making any kind of decisions about activities. That was something that we added to the resolution. And then in addition, we did make sure that we added the school bus component. The school bus component is a requirement of the feds. It's a TSA rule that's implemented. So regardless of where you are in Minnesota, the face coverings are required on school buses, and that's TSA rule. And so no one has the choice on that. So I lay out these COVID-19 protocols for you this evening. I want to start and go back to the why. We have looked all summer forward to what we thought could be what I would say is a regular year. And unfortunately, we've seen some changes in the last few weeks, both from recommendations from national and state organizations, feedback from local medical practitioners, and we've worked very closely with a local epidemiologist in terms of looking at our planning for the year. And we've seen a number of different pieces. We've seen, I sat in on a call last week with Commissioner Malcolm from the Minnesota Department of Health, also on the state nurses call with Susan Clammer and Denise Herman from MDH. And what we're seeing is some of the latest parts around both the increase that we're seeing in cases, both state and nationwide, as they start to go up in this, what we're hoping is a very short surge. We're also seeing, for example, Commissioner Malcolm shared that in the 47% of all of the new cases from the last 2 months in Minnesota have happened in the last 2 weeks. This is information she gave us last week. Same thing with hospitalizations, an increase in hospitalizations, 32% of the hospitalizations that took place in the state over the last 2 months took place in the last 2 weeks. So that's some part about seeing the COVID rate go up. Not nearly what we saw last November. We're hoping that it'd be a surge, something even less than what we saw in April. So that's one part, that we have a change in how those pieces of data are increasing. The second component is around vaccinations, right? So we are seeing an increase in vaccinations in Minnesota, but we've also been looking at our eligible vaccinatable population. And so we know that vaccines are only available for students 12 and older at this time. And we've been trying to use aggregate data to analyze what percentage of our students have been vaccinated. You know, the more students that are vaccinated, that helps us be able to maintain that environment and disrupt the chain of transmission. And so using aggregate data based upon the 55057 zip code, which is not perfect, we had been estimating around 50% of our 16 and 17-year-olds had been vaccinated, and estimating just north of 40% of our students 12 to 15 have been vaccinated. Just this week, we are starting to be able to get a little bit more precise with that in terms of using the Minnesota immunization system And so we ran some data again today. It's looking that now that we can look at it in the 12 to 17 category, it's looking that we're just a little bit over 50% in that area. So again, we only have about half, just a little bit more than half of our 12 to 17-year-olds who are vaccinated. And so we look at all of those pieces coming together. We also looked and worked with Dr. Miller at some research that had come out of MIT. And you're going to notice that this year's protocol recommendation, very different from last year. I think it's so important for us to talk about how in a much better place we are this year than last year. We're not preparing for 3 different kinds of learning models. We are not talking about having to make sure that things are spaced 6 feet apart. We're not talking about restrictions in terms of bus capacity. There's been so much that has been learned in the last year. And the truth is that I'm incredibly disappointed that we have to recommend any protocols or any safety measures. But unfortunately, we're at a point where we at least have to recommend them to start the year. I do want to emphasize this is something that I think will be different than last year. I think we were all resigned last year to have protocols that lasted the entire school year. I am very hopeful that that is not the case this year. In fact, I'm fairly confident that that will not be the case. But the recommendations that we're making are based on those first 2 points. And then again, the reason that we're really going with far fewer safety protocols, working with Dr. Miller and really looking at the research out of MIT that looked at what were the things that did help prevent transmission. And so unfortunately, as you continue to learn, distancing is not something that researchers have found made that significant of a difference, especially when you are engaged with people in a longer term scenario. So if you're in a shorter term interaction, the distancing did make a difference according to this study from MIT. But when we look at classrooms and we look at other places where you're in an enclosed space for a period of time, their research showed that really it had to do with how many people were in the room and for how long. And then they looked at a number of different metrics in terms of things like they had looked at the distance piece, they looked at ventilation. I'm happy to share with you, that because of the work that was done in the last 15 years, the districts, you're hearing about many districts that are talking about a lot of different ventilation needs. Our district just doesn't have that same level of need because we updated all of our systems in the last 15 years. We use computerized control. We have a consultant from NAC come out once a month to recommission basically each building to look at the airflow and look at how often we're recirculating air. We're using MERV, in most cases, we're using what's called a MERV 11 filter, which is a hospital grade filter. It's not a surgery grade filter, but we are using a high level of filtration. And we're always balancing on that. How much fresh air can you pull through versus how much you're filtering? So one of the things that this group of researchers found was the ventilation was very important. And then the other part that they found was the difference between what activities that people were doing and whether they were wearing a face mask or not. And this group did find that the difference in the amount of time that people can spend in one space together once an infected person enters the area, that if people are wearing a face covering, that extends the amount of time that people are able to stay in that same area significantly. In fact, the difference is quite startling. And so especially as we see cases rising, I'm hoping it's a very short term. It's only a couple of weeks. I acknowledge that it is something that I'm hopeful that within 2 weeks we see it going back down and there's a lot of options then. We look at the vaccination and then we look at what are the most limited safety measures that we could take to prioritize in-person schooling. I understand. I want to just thank all of the people who have contacted the district over the last month, I would say, right? We've had people contacting us for a month, sharing their deep-seated beliefs and hopes for what the school year would be. And I've said to nearly every one of them how, especially in the last week, about how disappointed I am that we even have to recommend any safety measures. And I truly mean that from the bottom of my heart. This is not anything that we take pleasure in doing. But we're also looking at the biggest issue that we had last year was quarantining. That was the biggest issue because when our school nurses would call a family and have to say, your student was a close contact to someone who had tested positive, and they have to be out for up to 10 days. We had 3 options for quarantine from the Department of Health. For most of the year, we used the 10-day quarantine. We didn't use the most restrictive, which was the 14. Toward the end of the year, we were able for a short time to move to the 7-day quarantine because of lowering case rates. But I think if you talk to most parents, the biggest issue that they had was quarantine because the lack of predictability was important. Now, the change in the CDC guidance that allows students who were, if both students in interaction were wearing a face covering, that a well-fitted face mask is their terminology, that the student who didn't test positive does not have to quarantine is the big deal. And that was one of the pieces that we weighed, right? Because we don't want to have to send kids home. We want to we know the best thing for kids is to be in school for most kids, right? There's a lot of kids who really did thrive in the online environment. We're seeing 60+ kids who are signing up for porters. So that means there are people who really like that option. And I want to be clear, we're talking about this component only for indoors, right? So when we think about trying to push a lot of activities outdoors, we will continue to encourage that. We are not going to get the canopies again this year. We actually found that people really appreciated going outside, need the canopies to go outside, but we're going to continue to push people to go outside, especially early in the year. So really, in general, the face covering part is the only safety measure that we're recommending. And we do hope that it is short-lived. I know some people would like to say, well, what's the number when you're going to take it off? I think of one of the things that we've learned in the last year is that there is no one number, right? It's a combination of things together, right? And so what I can pledge to you is that we will continue to look at this regularly. And as soon as we feel that we could remove that, we would certainly do so as quickly as we possibly can. What we don't want to see is we hope that we don't have to see, a year where we're shifting in and out of various protocols. And I do understand wholeheartedly that not all of our friends and neighbors in this community agree with the recommendation. And I respect that. I really do. I understand that people come from different perspectives. And what I have tried to do, and what we've worked with our incident command team, who brings this forward to you unanimously, is looking at when we're weighing these safety measures, what are the things that we can do? You can never guarantee, right? We can never guarantee, but what are the things that we can put in place that can keep our students? And we're not talking about people going to distance learning. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about making sure that we don't have to quarantine kids during the school year. And if we can get through this surge, we're hopeful that we can potentially recommend to you that we remove that. I do want to be transparent that because of the lack of ability for our younger students to be vaccinated, that may go a bit longer. And we understand that we now have local control, right? So last year a lot of people were very frustrated with the state, that the state had a blanket piece across the state. And that was frustrating to a lot of people. Now that there is not a state requirement, there is a set of state recommendations, which these are the state recommendations. They're the recommendations from the American Academy of Pediatrics, from the Centers for Disease Control, from Minnesota Department of Health. And then you've heard from our local experts here in terms of over 24 physicians. Northfield Hospital and Clinics has also advocated and provided a letter of support for this one safety measure. And so that's why we bring it to you. Recognizing that not everyone, reasonable people can disagree, and not everyone agrees with this, and we understand that. But that's what happens when you have local control, right? We look at those and we look at our circumstance. I understand that our districts around us that will make a different decision, and I applaud them for making the decision that is right for their community. The proposal that I have before you this evening is based upon talking with a lot of folks and hearing a lot of different opinions. What we think, at least to start, is the thing that we can use to prioritize and make sure that kids are on campus learning as much as possible. So that's where it comes from. There's two parts. There is what we're trying to use as a simple way to share with families what the protocols are. That's the first piece. And then there is a resolution. That resolution is the sample resolution from the Minnesota School Boards Association for districts to be able to take. Also understand that resolution does empower myself in consultation with the board chair and public health officials to make any changes that we would need. And of course, as the fail-safe, you'd have the chance to override any of those changes at your next meeting. One of the pieces I want to be straightforward about is that we do not have a complete answer on athletics yet. We are hoping to get some guidance from the State High School League. And I really want what Jeff said before, not having a statewide set of guidance could be very difficult. And it very well could be that there could be some different expectations after the school day than during the school day. There's a difference between when people are compelled to be here and when they have a choice to participate in something. So that is something I want to just be straightforward, that we'll make those decisions as we hopefully hear something from the State High School League. And if not, we'll work with public health. We will work with our incident command team, and we'll do the best that we can to come up with the protocols that are reasonable for those after school activities as we move ahead. So with that, I think it's important for us. One of the reasons I thought it was important for you to have this evening is so people understand and know. I know that there's a lot of thought discussion about, well, what if you could wait another 2 or 3 weeks? Then maybe you'd have a little more, but if there are people who really just that this is an important thing for them to make a decision about the educational options for their children right now, I think we owe it to them to try to be able to offer that at this time. And so, I understand there's some schools of thought, wait as long as you can. I think that that's also a little bit disingenuous if we were to try to wait and then say, oh, we got to do this 2 weeks before school starts. I'm hopeful maybe something will go the other way. We'll be able to make some other changes before, but we just don't know. And so trying to be as upfront as we can so that people who may need something different for their children, that they have that full, a full school starts a month from today. And so that is the purpose of trying to bring it to you today. So that is the set of recommendations that I have for you. It's very limited safety. I do want to point out one other thing, which is around the volunteers. Volunteers are essential to the school district. We are blessed to have the 2 colleges who really have a tremendous amount of volunteerism in our schools. And when I talked to St. Olaf about that we were planning to allow volunteers again, I think that they were thrilled. They rely on us for that right as much as we rely on them. And the other part is that we also have quite a few elderly people who also volunteer. And so the decision, our students have to be here, our employees have to be here, right? There's a lot of different, you're seeing a lot of different thoughts about whether public entities can require their employees to vaccinate. That is not something that we are at this point. We obviously are not yet talking anything about requiring any students to vaccinate. That's clearly not on the table for quite some time. But in discussing this, how can we create layers of mitigation to where we can have our volunteers at our schools while also making sure that we can keep the environment as safe as possible? And as we looked at that, frankly, there are very few schools who are allowing volunteers again this year. I think that there's only one other school in the Big 9 who is talking about allowing volunteers. So as we want to have those people on campus, we looked at what are the layers of mitigation that we could do to make sure that we protect them, and then also to create another barrier for our students to be able to keep them safe. And so that requirement of vaccination for volunteers. Now, volunteers are different than a visitor, right? I stopped by to drop something. Of course, we're not asking people to produce a vaccination card for that, right? But we are asking people who want to volunteer on a regular basis to demonstrate that they are vaccinated. And I understand again that that is something that does not meet everyone's need. But when we look at the balance, are we able to allow volunteers when many places are not allowing them? Or do we allow volunteers but add this layer of mitigation? And again, as we talked about this through our incident command team and discussed it, we felt that this was the way we could get the volunteers back into our school with another layer of mitigation. And I understand that not everyone's going to be able to comply with that. But at the same time, if we didn't have that, first of all, I'm not sure I could recommend that we'd allow volunteers back. And if we did, I think we'd also lose a number of other volunteers in that circumstance as well, because I think there are some folks who are also looking at that as a potential piece for them to, again, feel some safety in their own personal health as well. So in general, those are the protocols. As I mentioned, the not having to quarantine is a key piece. Cleaning and hygiene, we've learned that regular cleaning is essential, but we don't have to be doing the things like we did last year where we're cleaning in classrooms in between every hour. That's something that we've learned over the last year that is not necessary. Really, it comes down to making sure that we can limit the distribution of those respiratory droplets. And so these are the pieces that I'm sharing with you today that we believe have the best chance to keep kids in school and limit that quarantine.
Excellent, thank you. Questions or comments? Amy?
First, I'm really excited that it sounds like we're essentially going back to normal with the exception of the masks. And there's a few other things, but that's the main thing that people be affected by, including the normal of having the students in the high school and the middle school not have to stay in a pod, not have to walk one direction in the hallways, not have to sit in specific seats at the dining room, in the cafeterias. So having flex time again in the high school, it's really returning almost to normal. So that's very exciting. I do have 2 questions though. The first one is about visitors. So I understand you just said if someone wants to volunteer regularly in a classroom, then they have to be vaccinated, is the proposal. But what if they just want to come and have lunch with their child that day? So they'd be in the
Right.
school for an hour or so without a mask,
No, with a mask, everyone is required
but
to have,
it'd be at
yeah,
lunch.
at the lunch, sure, yeah.
So I'm wondering if you thought that through a little bit more, or
So
what that
right now
means.
at this point, they would be considered a visitor and they would not be required to vax. That would be more of a visit rather than a vaccination.
Okay,
And when parents come in to have lunch with their children, depending on the cafeteria, a lot of times they sit at a smaller table. And so that is something that at this point, we're not considering those folks volunteers, we're considering them visitors.
it's good. So I think that would be something that would need to be clearly sort of defined for the parents to understand what their options are that way. My other question has to do with masking the youngest children, the 2, the 3, 4-year-old children. Maybe I should direct this to Aaron. Just I'm wondering if that's really practical. Do they really keep their masks on? Is it something that we can really do?
As Aaron's coming to the podium, this is a difference in the, what we had versus this year versus last year. Last year, the guidance that we had was that students under, under the age of 5 did not need to mask. And that this is something that is new. And our understanding is it has to do with some of the latest variants that are more, where younger children are more susceptible to catching this virus versus the previous iterations of it. So that is a difference between this year's recommendations and the guidance that we're getting from CDC and MDH and last year. So we both understand totally that it's, wait a minute, this is not how it was in the past. Why is it this year? And we certainly understand and get that part. But Aaron and I have talked about this in detail. And so Aaron, I'd like you to lay out your perspective on it.
Sure. So if you take hand-in-hand preschool and early ventures, and we'll take them. So hand-in-hand preschool this last year, we did have kids that would wear masks the entire time they were at preschool. Preschool was a half-day program. So we had more kids that would wear masks in that program than early ventures. Early ventures, children tend to be, they can be there 8 to 10 hours a day. Some children would wear masks, some for smaller portions of the day, some for longer portions of the day. Is it going to take some getting used to? Yes. Are we going to work with families? Absolutely. Will we likely look at how we can do things outside, things for more mask breaks, how that we will be able to run circle time outside, especially when the weather permits. We will look at how we can adjust some things to make sure that kids have mask breaks. I think when you start looking at children that are 2, 3, that is going to take more getting used to. Those that are 4 and 5 that I've noticed in the building, they're now more used to wearing, they see that as more common, especially if they've gone places sometimes with their families. In the last year, they are wearing masks. I look at my own children, right? Being 3 and 5 and where they stand and what they are able to do. Does my 3-year-old need more practice with masks before this fall? Absolutely. But I think also when you start to see this doing it in classrooms, in classrooms where they would have a whole class in a wearing a mask too, that will also help. But again, we will work with families. We will, work with their children because we want children to be successful at this.
And you said there'd be opportunities to spend maybe more time than normal outside, or, so they wouldn't have to have their masks on
Yes,
then.
absolutely. We are fortunate enough. We have a very large, fenced-in playground area. We have lots of space that we can use on all sides of our building, truthfully, that we can look at how we schedule our day. I think especially as we are getting, when we have this fall and the weather is nice, for our programs, this goes into effect if it is approved on Wednesday. So we are going to obviously, for some of these kids, that's a learning curve if they have not done this a lot outside of in any other outside settings at this point. So we're going to have to make this, a transition that is workable for people too. And that will likely include more time outside as we learn to wear a mask more inside.
And I do just want to emphasize, what we're talking about outdoors, there is no requirement, right? So we're not talking about any outside. And I think that early ventures and hand in hand of all, those programs are outside all the time. And I visit that building at least every 2 weeks. And when we do our building walkthrough,
Yep.
It's easy that half to 3/4, regardless of the time that I'm there, that they are outside, even in the winter. And so I think the key thing is that is a building that understands the importance of outside play. And we believe that learning occurs with young children through play, right? And so a lot of that can happen outside, and we are blessed to have, quite a large space at Northfield Community Education Center. You've got the nature classroom right next door. You've got the fenced-in playground. You've got several green spaces where those students can run and play. We've got the brand new playground that you've heard about a number of times. We've got great asphalt areas as well for, some of those other kinds of games and bike riding. In fact, they're painting a bike riding deal on the asphalt right now. So we do believe that children learn best through play at that age. And so, that ability to do that outside is always there, but it's going to even be more emphasized.
And then, of course, we won't be requiring masks while eating or resting either, which is chunks of time for students.
So the other question I have is, I've heard that there's now again sort of a mask shortage because everybody sold their masks, and I'm wondering if for families, if they haven't had to buy masks for their small children, whether that could be an issue. And have you thought about that at all?
We've looked into so that we would have some available on site for children that would need masks. So we've looked in, I haven't had any trouble getting disposable masks. I think if there is certain brands potentially of cloth masks that you're looking for, there's certain brands might be limited, but there doesn't seem to be a limitation on disposable masks. We are also looking as a district to make sure that we have some on hand. Should we need to have children that need some, or someone that comes into the building that would need a mask?
So Amy, we have a reserve from last year. The state did provide us, ridiculous amount of masks last year. We have nearly 900 of them left. They're not small, really small child size. We've already ordered additional masks, disposable masks that are of various sizes. And then our buildings and grounds department has been responsible for all of the PPE. And what I'm understanding from buildings and grounds department is that there's actually a fairly good mask supply right now, and they're getting some samples in this week to be able to do some additional ordering. So if that is the case, again, we're not in the same place last year where you were, and locally, the mask brigade that Kathy Ness had started, she's already started that back up again. So from a perspective of quantity, it's not something that we have a terrible concern about.
And so I just want to make sure that all teachers of all grade levels will be encouraged to use the outside areas
Of course.
as much as possible. That'll be in writing somehow or conveyed to them while this process is
As always, yep.
lasting. Okay, thank you.
Tom? Well, we could do the motion now. You're right, Tom, I kind of got waylaid. We started with Dr. Hillman's presentation, so we can go ahead and since we are getting into discussion and questions, thank you, Tom. Let's go ahead and get a motion on the table. So is there a motion to approve the COVID-19 safety protocols as presented? Moved by Jeff. Moved by Tom. Is there a second? Second by Noel. Okay, we do now can have questions and comments. So Amy, thank you for those questions. Is there other board members who have questions? Noel?
I hope the story will be helpful. I got a call from my nephew about a month ago. He said he wanted to come to Minnesota and visit relatives in Minnesota and Wisconsin. He's from Idaho. And I said, well, have you been vaccinated? He said, no, I don't believe in vaccination. No. Well, you're going to drive 1,500 miles. You got a spare tire? Yeah. You use your seatbelt? So I click them every time I leave the garage. Oh, okay. Well, he said, my Christian philosophy is that God will take care of me. I have a similar Christian philosophy, but I don't believe that means that I can walk against the red light and hope he's going to take care of me. There are some precautions that are available, and my philosophy is I really think we need to use them. And secondly, I received an anonymous email. I don't know how you get anonymous email, but I got one. That said, it's possible that schools who ignore the recommendations of the medical profession could be sued. Is that a possibility?
So Noel, we did talk with our insurance company because there's a lot of questions about that. And so I think what the insurance companies have told us is as long as school districts follow what the public health guidance is, you are safe.
This email seemed to indicate that if there was a rash of illnesses or a death, the possibility of being sued would be very real.
I think that that would be for people who willfully ignored
Okay,
specifically the public health guidance.
all right.
But I think I want to also come back though, that when we're talking about last year where there were statewide requirements, right? The state is not requiring people, that they are making recommendations to school districts to do this. In fact, universal masking is the recommendation. They're recommending that school districts adopt universal masking. They're not requiring it. They're giving local control. So I think I really need to make the distinction. Last year, when there was a peacetime emergency and an executive order, a school that willfully went against that, I think had a much more significant insurance liability than they would have this year. I do think there's a little bit more room for school districts because of the local control. When we think about these decisions, Noel, we are thinking about all sorts of things. We're thinking about the social implications of this, because really this has the weight of policy, right? This decision has the weight of policy. And so we're thinking about what are the social implications we're taking that into account, the social implications of a decision. We're taking into account the educational implications of a decision. As a publicly elected board, you always take into account the political ramifications of such a policy decision. And then we also have to take into account the financial aspects of those decisions. I think that you've heard me try to lay all of those pieces out. The insurance isn't something that I thought I'd bring up, because again, I think last year would have been very different than this year. I think that because of the local control and the way that the guidance is framed this year versus last year is different. So I do not have any concerns from a liability perspective for the district in terms of the example that you gave.
Sure, go ahead, Noel.
Thank you for the comments that you made. They were really helpful in making me think about some of the issues. Thank you so much.
Other questions, comments? Tom?
In the past, if a family had COVID, were they required to report it?
Yes.
But now it says should. So people could have COVID. There could be a student in school with COVID potentially.
So what we've learned over the last year is that when a person has an actual positive PCR test from a provider, when we have that actual designation that someone has tested positive for COVID-19, actually it became through the antigen test at the end of the year as well. If the family doesn't report it to us, it actually ends up to us through the Minnesota Department of Health. Now, at the same time, parents do not need to give permission to allow MDH to tell us that their child did test positive. So from time to time, we will get something from MDH that will say, we want you to know there is someone who did test positive in your school district. We can't tell you who it is. So yes, there is the possibility that I will say the probability that we have had, and we know we've had students who have been on campus who, after they had tested positive, MDH does follow up with each school district. That's how they did it last year. We're waiting to see how they're going to handle it this year. We don't see it being any different than last year, but parents did have the option to not share it, which is why we've changed the way that we phrase that.
So there could be students if there were no masks, there could be students in school with COVID. We wouldn't know it. And if there were no masks, they could be potentially spreading it.
That scenario would be true.
Yes.
It would be possible. It would be
Right.
possible. And frankly, it's even possible with the masks.
Right.
It is still
but-
possible, yes.
Yeah, but limited. So we got a lot of letters also from families who were supportive of the masks, quite passionately in support of them, recognizing that COVID still has is only 98.3% survival rate, not 99.6. So if I were to send my kid to school, I would want it to be as safe as possible using the best science available. And and we know that masks work. And it's a small ask to make. Kids wore masks last year. They wore them for long periods. If you go into some businesses now, you have to wear them again. And we're tough. Or maybe we used to be tough and could do these things. given that we all need to be protected and there's a minimum thing we can do, wearing a mask, I think that necessity overrides a personal choice, because your personal choice of not wearing a mask puts my child in danger of not having their personal choice or right to life. And you, and again, if someone has COVID and they're in school and they're unmasked, and even if my kid is masked, the potential for them to spread it is higher. And that takes away my right. My right as a parent to send my kid to a safe school. If you don't want to wear a mask at your church, at your any other activity, fine. But in a public school where our job is to educate everybody and protect them and make it a safe place for them, the least we can do is follow the guidance of the science, of the real science, not Dr. Quack on the internet, and mask kids. So.
Thanks, Tom. Other questions or comments? Corey, I'll go to you and then to Noel.
Go ahead. I'll start by sharing my appreciation and respect to the 9 people who shared their stories tonight, as well as the many emails we received and calls I received over the last few weeks, even ahead of an announcement that potentially a protocol would be in place. I think the importance of tonight's commenters underscored that this is not a binary issue, that there's a lot of nuance in personal choice and family choice. I think as a school board, we're charged with protecting 4,500 people in school buildings, most of whom are students. I look at last year and I had much more reaction in my short time on the board, joining in January, via calls and emails about how school was being operated last year with hybrid, with portage, with going in, going out. Even if the slightest chance of having masks on students for 6 weeks, less maybe, hopefully, mitigates disruption, I think that goes a long way in securing a normal school year that we're all still hungry for. So I'm supportive of this. I have 2 children in the schools. My story is anecdotal, just like anybody else's. My kids did just fine with masks, but that does not mean other kids did well. But I know for those 2 months that my kids were home, they much rather would have been in school. So I am supportive of this and I will be voting for it.
Thanks, Corey. Noel?
One of the metaphors that the doctor used, I thought was really interesting. It was a sports metaphor. And he said, if you're playing football and you're ahead by 1 point, you might be able to run out the clock. You won't be able to do that with coronavirus. You cannot run out the clock on coronavirus because it'll get you. It has no discipline as to who it's going to affect.
Thanks, Noel. Other questions or comments? Jeff?
Matt, you said, on that, said, well, let's start out with this with recommendation with all the doctors you had. I used to work with a medical outcomes company and I could get 25, I could get 100 that have the opposite point. But I mean, I think if you're going to frame a decision and somebody that's going to be fair to recommend something, you need to have both sides of the position. I mean, you have, we're the Northfield public schools. We're not, the Northfield government schools. We don't give one alternative. We're here to represent the community. And yeah, it depends on, one of the things that in the science is you're going to have that debate back and forth, masks work, masks don't work. I mean, that's not the point. The point is how do we honor both sides of the issue? And one of the points is, you said 6 weeks. I mean, and part of it, this is my 11th year on the school board. And I do feel, from when I've talked to you last, this whole thing feels a bit rushed to me. And I think that we could delay the decision 2 weeks. I mean, obviously you can see from who's wearing a mask and who's not. I mean, you're going to have the votes to pass whatever it is, that you want with your resolution. It's just the fact that we don't start school for another month. You already have 6 weeks from like right now. So the point is, even if you got into school and you went 6 weeks, what are the data points for flipping the light on, for, going to no masks and flipping the light off? I mean, if I don't see a real concrete solution with data across the board that's all uniform, what is that?
Yeah, I think you raise a very fair point, Jeff, and I think what I want to be very careful about, first of all, I appreciate your perspective on waiting. Again, there's a good and a bad to waiting, right? I mean, I think that by sharing with folks what the plans are right now, they are plans, right? By sharing plans with folks, if there are people who need to make a different decision for their educational option, as you said, Minnesota is a place where we have a tremendous amount of public school choice. Northfield Public Schools has always supported public school choice. We're one of only 2 school districts in the state that still authorize charter schools. So wanting to give families an honest, hey, here's what we're looking at to start the year, so that if people want to make a different decision, that they have time to do so. I fear that if we were to put it off another couple of weeks, that people would rightfully have a concern that we waited till the last minute before all their and unfortunately, we've had to wait till the last minute on so much with this. And so we have pledged to people to try to do the best that we can. Not perfect, right? Never perfect. Sometimes not even good enough, but to do the best that we can with the circumstances that we have to communicate effectively about what our decisions are. We've had very little chance to do that over the last 18 months. This seemed fair. Even if you think about it, last year, we didn't announce any kind of decision until August 17th about what learning models we were starting in. So that's the impetus, Jeff, and that's the reason for wanting to do this today. In terms of giving you a number, I don't have it. I could make something up for you, but I don't think that that is reasonable. I think that during the pandemic, that is one of the things that I do think has impacted public confidence, is a goal that then is met and then feels like the goalpost change, or there's something else, another mitigating factor that so what are the things that we would consider, like we have all along? We learned this right away last year. Within 1 week of school, we dropped below a particular number, and people expected on Monday that we were going to switch to a different learning model. The same thing happened a month later when we went over one number. People expect us to switch to, in that case, was a more conservative learning model. We can't do that. And so what I would look for is a few things, Jeff. Number one, we're going to look at, I would say, 3 pieces of data that we will be looking at regularly. The first part is the influenza-like illness rate in our schools. So that's something that we've been calculating for a long time, not just during COVID. That goes back decades to where when parents call their kids in, we ask them for what the symptoms that they have. And the State Department of Health for years has said, if you have 5% or more of your kids out because of influenza-like illness rates, they wanted you to do something different. You might recall a couple of years ago, there was an elementary school in Shakopee that had to shut down for about a week. It was due to influenza. Last year, we kept a daily record of the influenza-like illness rate. And thankfully, we only got close to that 5%, one time in one elementary building, which was great. In fact, that low influenza illness-like rate was one of the reasons that we brought kids back to school full-time at the secondary level, getting out of the hybrid into the full-time in person last spring, even though we saw the cases at still a fairly high level comparatively for the time. But that daily influenza-like illness rate was something that we really used. And that's something that our nurses completely, they know that that's an indicator. So that would be one piece that we will look at. Are we seeing students with influenza-like illness symptoms at home that include the COVID-related symptoms? The second piece of data that we'll look at is they are looking at the case rate slightly differently, but we will of course continue to consider how many cases are there in the county, how many are there in the community, how many are in the school. And then the third piece that I think is important for us to look at is the vaccination rate. And so looking at if we have a rising in vaccination rate amongst those eligible, we have a declining or a what would be considered an acceptable level of influenza-like illness rate, very low. We see that over a period. Those are the kinds of things that would prompt the incident command team to look at it and say, yep, we think we can make this change at this point. Is that 4 weeks? Is it 6 weeks? Is it 2? I don't know the answer to that. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to give people false hope of if we hit this number, it's because that if there's something that we've learned during this, there isn't a number that can indicate that we are home. So right or wrong, Jeff, I mean, you and I have had a good discussion and we've respected each other over it. So I think that's where I'm at in terms of, I don't have enough. I wish I had a concrete, if I had a concrete answer, I think, boy, we'd be doing pretty well. I don't. And I hate that. You know me, Jeff. You know I hate not having a concrete number to go after, but I'd also not be telling people that
Right.
with transparency.
Right.
I just don't have that for you right now.
Thanks for that comment. My number one priority as a representative here of, and being on the Northfield School Board in my 11 years, it's great to be here. Not anti-vax. I mean, I got vaccinated back when I think most of you guys did back in, was it February 10th and March 10th? And, I don't understand in a sense, why we have to wear masks if we've been vaccinated, but that's another issue. I totally 100%, regardless of whatever your background is, because this is can be a political football. I don't care what your political affiliation is or isn't, but I 100% support parents, guardians, and students and doctors to make this their own decision of how they can do that. So, I mean, you really have, it's obviously a polarized group over there with the families, a lot of them, they feel isolated and they don't feel like, and I think we need to do a better job of somehow reaching out and figuring out some better options and communicate what those are to these families. And I think I'm not gonna tell you, I'm not gonna, as a guy, I didn't sign up for the Northfield Public Health Committee. I'm on the Northfield School Board. And I think getting into my next point here, Governor Walz is the governor. I respect the governor because he's the governor. Okay. And the state legislators currently have no mask mandates for school. For that reason, I see no reason to mandate the wearing of masks in our district and make that the choice of the family. If the governor and state legislatures want to mandate that, that's their choice. If there is a mask mandate, it should come from the governor and the state legislature. What I think, and I've got friends on both sides of the aisle, and I talked to one of them today, and he says, well, we're a highly dysfunctional group. And I'm thinking, well, that's not what I want to hear. And I just think that this whole process, and you've got 87 counties, you've got 330 school districts, independent school districts. And I think that if you don't have, this is, the be lame game, the blame game, there's plenty of blame to go around. And the reason, and I can understand with, Governor Walz, this is a huge political thing. And I think that he's probably gotten pressure on both aisles and he's just kind of opting out of it. But I would much rather see left or right or indifferent. And I see it as a failure of leadership on both sides of the aisle. And, I'm not picking on the governor, but I think that I would like to have seen, some more better criteria here coming into this, because this whole process, and I don't think this is gonna, this isn't gonna go away. It's not gonna, and I just, to me, it just seems like all over the map when you're just letting, school districts that are really, we're here to set policy on education. We're not public health experts. And I think that maybe from the state, there should have been some kind of more, recommendation from the governor's office, but saying it's not a mandate. You don't have to wear the mask, but you have to somehow figure out a way to both honor the people that really want to wear the mask and the families and their choice not to wear the mask. And I think, you're talking about, and the wishy-washy part of this is what is the flip on switch and what is the flip off switch? And again, what you're saying, this is a virus and you don't really know. And so that's kind of, what I don't want to see is this goes on and on and on and on and on. And I don't know, it seems to me like when we thought we had this kind of under control in a sense, now there's a new, it just seems kind of weird. And it's another new territory that we're in that, really haven't figured out and probably have to, and I don't know why you can't go 2 weeks and take a look at something versus, 4 weeks or 6 weeks. And I suppose for your model or whatever the data is, you're suggesting that to go 6 weeks.
And to be clear, there have been some recommendations from some thinking about a 6-week. What I've said is that we would review it regularly in an ongoing way. So you'll notice in my piece that I'm not saying that it is anything about 6 weeks. It is that we'd review it regularly and make those decisions. I do think that giving enough time is an appropriate piece. Is that 4 weeks? Is it 2 weeks? I don't know the answer to that, but if we see things change one way or the other, as you know, we've not been afraid to make some tough decisions during this time frame. So we'll continue to look at it, Jeff.
Well, for now, those are my comments. So I appreciate everybody's input.
Thanks, Jeff. Corey.
Just real quick, I want to say I support going tonight instead of the 23rd. And Matt kind of said this, but just to reiterate that it affords families the opportunity, not that we want to lose anybody, of course, but this gives them the opportunity to look at other options. Maybe it's Portage, maybe it's another district. I bring this up in saying that there are families on the other side who are waiting for a decision on this to come to our district. I heard from a family this weekend, family of 4, 3 in elementary school. They have a kid who's looking forward to going to 2nd grade for the first time in a building because he's a cancer survivor. Missed kindergarten because he was in chemo, didn't go last year. None of his siblings went to school last year because of out of safety for his livelihood. He's looking forward to going to school this year because of the mask mandate. I've heard from others with similar stories, not as much to that degree, but it goes both ways. And Jeff's right. It's hard to please everybody. We're not going to get everything 100% ever. And we just have to do what we think is best in this scenario.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay. Oh, yes, Tom, go ahead.
Just quick. Maybe one of the things that makes the time period of 6 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks reasonable is vaccination rates are going up now. But you get your first one 3 weeks later, second one still 2 weeks after that before you're fully vaccinated. So that's 5, 6 weeks out. So the effects of the vaccines we're getting now won't really start to show up for another potentially 2 months. So hopefully by then things will start to go down. And then the thing about the choice of wearing masks, doesn't it work best if everybody wears a mask? If you don't wear one and I do, okay, my mask offers me some protection. But the point I thought of a mask, among others, one, it does protect the wearer, but it contains the virus if you had it in your mask from not spreading to others. And there are videos that show this or explain that. So if somebody, unless we all do this, it's not as effective if only some of us do. And so we're either all in this together or we all, or the ship sinks. At least that's my way of looking at it. And I have one kid who would tell me every day he hated wearing or didn't want to wear the mask, but he did, and he survived. And the other kid was kind of meh. So when you look at it from the science, from the ways that worked, from all the evidence and all the data, if everybody wears a mask, we can get through this, and we can get through it faster, and we can get and if people get vaccinated, we can get through this, get through it faster, and we can get back to normal. And yes, there will be probably more variants, more challenges, just like there's the annual flu shot. And we've got science working on that. And in a matter of months, we got a vaccine that, by all evidence, is extremely effective and safe, like 99.999%, according to the CDC, of the hospitalizations and COVID deaths now are in unvaccinated people, 99.999%. If the vaccine wasn't as good as it was, that number wouldn't be nearly 100%. So there are things, whether we personally don't like it, whether we think it's going against our right or whatever, that at some point we have to unify. And there's a lot of talk of unification and doing things to doing the right thing. And I think in this instance, in a public health crisis, it's important that we do suck it up and do the right thing. So that's my speech.
All right, thanks, Tom. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I just want to thank board members for all their comments tonight, and first and foremost, thank Dr. Hillman for his leadership on this. You are correct. This isn't an easy decision for anyone. We desperately wish we were not in this situation, but we are. And first and foremost, our charge is to keep our students and staff safe, and we have said that since the onset of the pandemic. And in my view, that's what we're doing with our COVID protocols. And we are in a completely different place than we were. The Delta variant has dealt us something that is much different than what we were looking at previously, and we have to respond accordingly. And this resolution gives Dr. Hillman the guidance he needs to make the decisions, because it is a very quickly changing pandemic, and there's a lot of things that happen quickly, and you have the board support to make those decisions. And I also want to acknowledge the work of our district incident command team. I am on that team as the school board liaison, and they do incredible work. It's parents, students, healthcare professionals, those who work in our buildings, who are on the front lines. And these COVID protocols came from those discussions, and those were not easy discussions or easy decisions for that command team to make. And they have continued on from the work they did last year. And so we are grateful for the work that they're willing to do for the district as well. So if that's all the questions and comments, we have a motion and a second. This is a resolution, so we will take a roll call vote. Anita?
Aye.
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 Nay.
Motion carries. Okay, we'll go on now to items for information, open houses. Dr. Hillman, something to look
Yes.
forward to on September
Something to look forward to. We're
23rd.
very excited that we will be holding those open houses at the new Greenvale Park building, Northfield Community Education Center, at Spring Creek Elementary, Bridgewater, and the Northfield School District Office and Area Learning Center. They're scheduled really at most of those sites. It's going to be really kind of walkthrough. So we'll have an administrator there. We'll have someone from Wold. We'll have some tour guides so that people can take tours of those facilities. It'll run from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. And then at 7 p.m. at Greenvale Park, we will actually have a ribbon cutting, and we will have a small event there to, unfortunately, 1 year later, be able to commemorate the opening of that new elementary school that, really did a great job for us last year. And we're excited to be able to share that with the public this coming school year.
Excellent. Any questions or comments on the open house plans? Just very exciting. Okay, our next item for information is bid for purchase of the district MacBooks.
Yes,
Dr.
I've spoken with you about this before, just I've given you a heads up prior, but I want to share with you where we're at in the process right now. So we did have our teacher MacBook Pros that came off lease this past year. We've done all of the exchanges with our teachers and other people who are getting computers as part of that lease. And now Technology Services has been doing all the work to decommission those devices. And we now have out that as one unit, all of those devices out for bid. Have published those or are publishing those in the paper appropriately. And the bids have to be received by August 18th at 3 p.m. Central Time. We have to say that because we have people from all over the country who are looking at that. And then we will ask you on September 13th we will award that bid on September 13th, and then pending that a board approval. So we just want you to know that that is still in process. And again, we plan to use the proceeds from that sale to be able to help offset the cost of the new lease, at least in year one.
Questions or comments? I just have a quick question for Val. We have estimated a projected sale of those as part of the financials we did for the purchase of the new books, correct? Or did we?
I don't know that I included it in the budget.
Okay.
I'd
Okay,
have to go back and look.
that's fine.
It'll certainly be in the revised budget if it's not.
Okay. Because we
but
do
I'm-
feel that there's some value to these, correct?
Oh,
very much so,
absolutely.
yes.
Yeah, I recall Kim saying that there
In
is,
the
there is
400
value.
and
I
some
just
dollar
didn't
range, I
recall if
recall.
we had put that in as part of the financial or not. Okay,
I don't think that I did, but I can double check it.
yeah, no worries. Okay. Any other questions or comments on that? All right, so that is it for items for information. Thank you, everyone, for a good meeting. Future meetings, Monday, August 23rd, and then again on Monday, September 13th. Those are regular school board meetings, so they will begin at 7 p.m. in the Northfield Public Schools District Office Boardroom. So with that, I ask for a motion to adjourn, moved by Noel, second by Jeff. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.